Hey guys, tonight we're cracking the frost-covered window into one of the chilliest, strangest chapters of history, Victorian winters. You're about to wake up in a room so cold your breath clouds in front of your face, and you honestly can't tell if it's morning or midnight because the ice on the window is that thick. If you've ever felt your toes freeze under one blanket, imagine trying to survive with no central heating, no insulation, and no electric anything. Just soot, steam, and sheer willpower. You won't believe this, but some folks actually shared beds with their own brick, like actual oven-fired bricks, heated in the fire and wrapped in cloth as a kind of prehistoric electric blanket. Welcome to the era of open flames in bedrooms and frost forming inside your wash basin. All right, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe. But only if your heart says yes. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what's the time right now? Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You jolt awake and you can't feel your nose, or your fingers, or your backside, which has somehow frozen into the threadbare mattress. Your breath puffs into the dark like you're sleeping in a meat locker. You hear a crunch, not outside but inside, because the basin across the room is frozen solid. The rag you soaked yesterday to clean your face. It's a small icy flag now, stuck halfway to the floor, and this isn't a cabin in the Alps or a tent in Siberia, it's London. Your flat, or rather, your attic. Rented by the weak, cracked walls, single window, no chimney, no insulation either, because what self-respecting 19th century landlord would waste money stuffing sheep's wool between bricks? You roll over under 3 blankets, none of which are actually warm, and one of which might be infested with fleas. The cold isn't just annoying, it's a living, biting presence in the room. It hurts. You reach down toward the foot of your bed. There it is, the last line of defence, the brick. Last night you heated it in the fireplace downstairs, wrapped it in a bit of old flannel and prayed it wouldn't crack the bed frame if it rolled. It's still faintly warm now, warmer than your fingers at least, and you tuck it against your stomach like a teddy bear made of stone. Now you might be thinking, why don't you just close the window? You did. There's a blanket nailed over it, and a scarf stuffed in the gaps. Doesn't matter. The draft finds you anyway, trickling through the floorboards, through the gaps in the door, through the single cracked pane that refuses to ever quite seal shut. You shove your head under the covers and immediately regret it. The air smells like boiled cabbage and feet. The worst part? You're lucky. Other Londoners, thousands of them, are sleeping in alleys, barns, or charity wards. Whole families on the floor of a workhouse dormitory. Children curled against the sides of bakers' ovens. And you, with your own bed, your own room, your precious heated brick. You're practically royalty. You lie there, hoping the sun will rise soon. Not because it'll bring heat, it won't. Not through the grey slush sky, but because it's a signal that maybe you'll find a fire somewhere, that maybe the frost on the wash basin will melt just enough to give you water, that maybe, just maybe, today you won't have to choose between buying food or fuel. Then the cough comes, not yours, the neighbour's. Through the thin, water-stained wall, it's hacking and wet and makes you shudder harder than the cold ever could. Because everyone knows what a cough means in this kind of weather, and nobody wants to be the one who didn't survive the freeze. You throw back the covers, there's no use pretending to sleep, and your bare feet hit the icy floorboards with a slap that rings out like gunfire. No socks. They're still damp from yesterday. You reach for your shirt, stiff with frost, then your wool trousers, which might as well be made of sheet metal. You dress like a soldier preparing for war, every layer a battle strategy. And as you brace yourself to face the day, one thought comes back like a splinter in your mind. Winter's not even halfway over. You shuffle down the narrow staircase, each board groaning like it resents your weight. The banister is so cold it burns your palm, but you hold it anyway. Falling would be worse. At the bottom of the steps is a single communal room, the kind landlords boast about in advertisements. Shared kitchen and hearth. What they don't say is that the hearth hasn't been lit since Tuesday, and someone's stolen the poker. You tiptoe past your neighbour's door, the one with the peeling red paint. She's likely still curled under her shawls, muttering to herself and to God. You've heard her at night, whispering prayers in rhythm with the rats in the walls. The front door groans open with a shriek. Outside, the world is white, but not lovely white. Grey white, soot and sleet. It's the kind of winter where snow never settles clean. It mixes with chimney ash and carriage droppings. The footpath is crunchy and wet, and every puddle hides a trap of ice just waiting to snap your ankle. The breath of the city is slow, shallow. Even the horses look miserable. You pull your coat tighter, not that it helps. The lining's worn thin, the pockets have holes, and the buttons don't match. But it's yours. Better than some. On street corners you pass men in paper-thin coats patched with newspaper. Women clutching shawls over their heads, boots wrapped in string. Children with no gloves at all, their fingers glowing red like candles. And here's the strange thing. No one complains. No one says cold enough for you, or isn't it dreadful? The cold isn't a surprise. It's a given. It's as baked into life as hunger or smog. You endure it because you have to, because there are no other options. You stop by the grocer's window. The glass is fogged on the inside, warm air licking at the corners. You don't need to go in, you can't afford it. But you stand there for a full minute anyway, just stealing a bit of warmth through osmosis. The shopkeeper glares at you. He knows what you're doing, but he doesn't shoo you. Not yet. Down the lane, smoke curls from a chimney. Someone has a fire going. Rich folks, probably. You imagine them wrapped in fox fur robes, sipping mulled wine, reading poetry beside the hearth. Their windows are thick. Their rugs are deep. Their servants warm the bedpans for them, light the coals, air the linens before they ever have to feel the sting of cold iron on their skin. You think about what it would be like to live like that, just once, to wake up not covered in your own breath, to run water that doesn't need cracking, to own socks that don't freeze into a V-shape overnight. But then the cart rolls by, a heavy wagon clattering down the street with a load of coal. The driver is a boy, not much older than you were when you first left home. He's black-faced with soot, bundled in sacks tied with rope. His horse limps. He shouts half-heartedly, "Coal! Coal for sale!" But no one moves. No one answers. Because coal, this week, is the price of dinner. You know what that means. Tonight, your room will freeze again. The brick won't stay warm. The draft will creep in like a thief. And when you finally lie down, it won't be to rest. It'll be to brace. And yet, you keep walking. Past the bakers, past the pawnbrokers, past the gas lamp that's always half lit. You have errands to run, things to find, and most importantly, heat to hunt. Because in Victorian London, warmth isn't a luxury, it's survival. You smell the coal merchant's yard before you see it. A thick, burnt metal stench that clings to your throat and settles behind your eyes. It's not the cosy scent of a winter fire. It's sharper, like scorched rubber and wet stone, and it sticks to your clothes no matter how quickly you pass. You round the corner, and there it is, the Black Mountain. Dozens of tons of coal piled haphazardly, chunks the size of your fist tumbling down the sides like a slag avalanche. The yard is noisy with shouting, shoveling, the occasional grunt of a mule. Soot hangs in the air like mist, swirling with every step. This is where the city's warmth begins, and where yours might end. Coal is currency in winter. Not just heat, but power, control. Even among the poor, who gets coal and who doesn't decides everything. Some folks will trade food for it, others will steal it. You've seen worse. Fights in alleys, even one bloke tossed into the Thames over a sack of coke. Not that kind of coke, the other kind. The powdery, oily remnants of baked coal. Smells like eggs, burns like sin. But it's cheaper than the good stuff, and in a pinch it'll do. You glance around the yard, pretending to browse the options like some wealthy landowner selecting cuts of marble. There's lump coal, hard, dense, long-burning, out of your league, nut coal, easier to light, faster to vanish, and dust, swept into bags by the sly or desperate. You're looking for something small, affordable, something you can carry in one arm without breaking your back or drawing attention. Then you spot him. The boy. He's crouched near the far end of the pile, hands raw and blackened, sleeves too short for his arms. He's making little mounds, scraps, shavings, crumbs of fuel that no one would bother to sweep. He's not buying, he's scavenging. He catches your eye but doesn't flinch, just nods once. A silent message between frostbitten thieves. You edge over when the merchant isn't looking. A few coals roll loose. You snatch them quickly. Palms burning from the cold, but you don't stop. Your coat pockets are lined with canvas for this very purpose. You scoop in what you can and keep walking, casual, unbothered, like you're just a chimney sweep headed to work. No one stops you. No one ever does. Because everyone in this part of town understands the truth. Heat is survival, and no one questions how you get it. You pass a girl selling matches, not boxes, single sticks, and realise even she is part of the same game. A shivering economy of flame, one spark at a time. You wonder if she has any at home for herself, or if she lights her fingers just to pretend. Back in your room, you lay the stolen coals on the hearth like relics. You only have enough for one fire, maybe two if you stretch it with sawdust. But for tonight, that might be enough. Just enough to boil some tea. Just enough to warm your face. Just enough to fool your bones into thinking they're not dying. And when the flames finally flicker to life, crackling low, coughing like an old man, you hold your hands out and whisper the quietest thank you. Because in this city, every fire is a victory. The fire hisses as it catches, and you lean in close, cheek nearly to the grate. The warmth is fleeting, thin as breath, but it stirs your skin enough to send a ripple down your spine. For a moment you imagine what it must be like to have a whole room warmed by radiators, like the ones they're starting to install in posh hotels near Regent Street. Imagine not needing to choose between heat and food. But here, in your world, coal is not comfort, it's strategy. You learn to use it like a miser counts coins, a small lump at dawn, a pinch of dust at dusk, a tiny blaze for the kettle, just enough to steep the tea leaves twice before they're done. You learn to rake the ash, to catch the glowing core beneath yesterday's fire, to coax the embers back to life like a nervous animal. It's a game of patience and desperation. Some nights you trade with the neighbours, a half sack of coke in exchange for a few strips of bacon, a broken shovel for a burlap sack of firewood scraps. There's a quiet barter system that operates under every frozen eve. You don't speak of it. You just knock twice on a doorframe and hope the other side is as cold and desperate as you. You remember, not long ago, when a woman down the street got caught scraping coal from the rail tracks. Just the dust that shakes loose from supply cars on the journey in from the Midlands. Someone reported her. The constable made her tip her apron and give it all back. The train didn't even stop. It just dragged its trail of black gold away, as if heat itself was too good for you. That night she lit her fire with ripped book pages. It stank, but it burned, and she never got caught again. The coal itself isn't kind. It's greasy. It stains your fingers until they look diseased. The dust gets into your teeth, your bed sheets, even your tea. But the worst part is the lungs. You know it's happening. You feel it in the back of your throat, in the tightness across your chest. That low, grinding cough. The chimney wheeze, some call it. It starts soft and stays quiet until it doesn't. But even then, you keep feeding the fire. You have to. Because in this city, freezing is faster than starving. You think back to the grand coal riots of the 60s, when prices spiked and mobs raided depots. It's not like now. Now, people are too hungry to riot. But the memory remains, like the black smudges on the walls. The city has always burned. It just doesn't always share the flame. By midday, the fire's gone. A faint heat clings to the brick hearth like a memory. You tap the ashes with a spoon, just in case. Nothing. And so begins the afternoon ritual, Coal Hunt, Part 2. This time, you don't bother with the yard. You go down by the alleys near the carpentry shop. The owner there sweeps out sawdust into bins, and if you're lucky, you can scoop some. Mixed with coal ash, it makes a smoky paste that burns slow. Chokes you, sure, but it burns. Another trick, dried horse dung. Don't wrinkle your nose. It's cleaner than you'd think. Country folk have done it for centuries, and in Victorian London the horses outnumber the cars, so there's plenty if you know where to look. Just don't burn it indoors unless you hate your lungs more than you love your toes. By the time you're home again, sack slung over your shoulder, you're half soot and half hope. You dump the scraps by the hearth and sit, not to rest, but to wait. Because night comes early in the cold, and when it does, you'll need every scrap of warmth you fought for today. The great coal hunger never ends. It only sleeps in embers. The sun dips below the skyline like it's retreating from the cold, and already your fingers are twitching with that telltale ache. It's not just cold anymore. It's war. And tonight, your battlefield is the bed. You eye it with the suspicion of a soldier facing an ambush. It looks innocent enough. A narrow iron frame, a sagging straw mattress, 2 quilts patched into oblivion, and one extremely untrustworthy pillow. But you know better. That bed's a trap. Once you're in, you're vulnerable. You either warm it, or it freezes you from the inside out. So, you prepare for battle. First, the kettle. You reheat whatever's left of the fire and set the chipped iron pot to boil. You're not making tea this time. You're heating the old warming pan, a shallow metal dish with a long handle and a lid that rattles when you walk. The Victorians use it like a secret weapon. Slide it between the sheets and run it up and down to take the edge off the cold. Of course, you're supposed to fill it with embers, but you don't trust the thing not to catch fire. So you pour in boiling water and seal it shut, praying the handle doesn't leak this time. You also toss in the brick. Not the one from last night. That one's already gone cold. This is the backup, smaller and more cracked, but better than nothing. You wrap it in rags and slip it under the covers like you're tucking in a child. Now for the layers. Undergarments stay on. Shirt, wool trousers, extra stockings. Another shirt. This one you stole from a wash line months ago. Then the final layer. Your coat. You sleep in it now. Everyone does. Some folks, especially the ones in boarding houses, sleep in 2s or 3s, back to back, hip to hip, under one giant quilt. There's even a term for it, top and tail. One person's head at the pillow, the other's at the foot so the breath doesn't mingle. Some say it's to save heat, others say it's to avoid the shame of sleeping face to face. Your neighbour once bragged that he sleeps between 2 warming pans and swears he hasn't sneezed since 1871. You're not convinced. He also claims his cat can sense hypothermia. You blow out the lamp and crawl beneath the covers. Everything's stiff. The quilts don't drape so much as lie on top of you like frozen pastry. You shuffle around, trying to find the warm spot. There isn't one yet, but if you lie still long enough, you'll make it. Your body becomes its own tiny furnace, turning that coffin-like bed into something survivable. The irony, The richest households never needed any of this. Their four-posters came with curtains, heavy velvet drapes that trapped body heat and blocked drafts, transforming the bed into a personal tent of warmth. Add a bed warmer, a fireplace in the bedroom, and servants to heat your boots, and you'd never know it was winter outside. You, on the other hand, have developed a sixth sense for the crack in the blanket that lets the cold in. Still, you sleep, or try to. Because what the Victorians never write about in their elegant diaries and etiquette guides is the real danger of a cold bed. What happens to your dreams? They twist, they shiver, they haunt you with old memories, ice storms, and the sound of coughing behind thin walls. Cold doesn't just settle in your bones, it finds your mind. You wake before dawn, again. Not because you're rested, but because your nose is numb, your teeth hurt, and your left calf cramped sometime in the night and still hasn't forgiven you. The warming pan is cold, the brick has gone stiff with frost, and your coat has twisted halfway around your neck like a snake. One of the blankets has slipped to the floor and now crackles with a thin crust of ice around the edges. The room hasn't gotten colder, it simply never warmed. You lie there a moment, wrapped in your layers like a shipwreck survivor, blinking up at the cracked ceiling and thinking, is this what every winter will be like from now on? Eventually survival kicks in. You force yourself upright, joints stiff, spine aching from the straw mattress that's more straw than mattress these days. You roll up the quilts, fold them tight to conserve what heat they still hold. Then comes the hardest part, getting out. Your feet touch the floor, and it's like stepping on wet slate. The chill zips straight up your legs. But you move anyway, because there's something even colder than the floor waiting just beyond the threshold. The bathroom, or rather, the wash corner. You don't have a real bathroom. You have a chipped porcelain basin perched on a wooden stand, a cracked mirror, and a chamber pot under the bed you pretend not to notice. The water in the basin is frozen again. You chip at it with a spoon until you can splash your face with something semi-liquid. The cold bites so sharply it makes your eyes water. But weirdly, that's the only part of your routine that makes you feel awake. You wrap yourself back in your coat and head downstairs, hoping for a whisper of warmth. In the hallway, you pass a strange sight. Something that makes you stop short. Someone left a pair of boots by the hearth. That's dangerous. Because here's a dirty little secret about Victorian living. If you leave anything unattended near the communal fire, it becomes fair game. Not just food, not just coal, but clothes, shoes, even your bedpan if it's fancy enough. People have woken to find their boots gone, replaced with older, cracked pairs, swapped like some grotesque fairy tale. You once heard about a man who left his dinner by the fire and came back to find the plate still there, but the stew replaced with grey water and a single boiled beet. Heat, in all its forms, breeds quiet war. And yet, your mind drifts to those who don't even have boots. You saw them yesterday, huddled in doorways with feet wrapped in newspaper and twine. People sleep on grates now, metal vents where warm air sometimes puffs up from the bakeries, or steam laundries below. Of course, it's not legal, police chase them off, but everyone knows the game. Move along, come back later, hope there's still heat left when you return. You make it to the kitchen, and your hands are already numb. The fire hasn't been lit yet. The embers from last night have gone grey, barely breathing. You kneel and poke at them, hoping for a flicker. Nothing. You blow gently, whispering curses and prayers in equal measure. A single spark glows, then dies. You feel something sink in your chest. That brick you warmed last night, all for nothing. It was never enough to last till morning. So you start over, from ash and soot, from a frozen basin, a damp coat, and a bed that punishes rest. And somewhere, in the back of your frostbitten brain, you remember hearing that in the posh districts some people have feather beds warmed by copper pipes. that maids like coals in special trays hidden inside the headboard. That one inventor even built a mattress that blows hot air through vents, like sleeping in a dragon's breath. You'll never see one, but the thought keeps you going. Because in this life, bedtime is not the end of the day. It's just another test to survive. The kitchen is the only room that ever truly warms, and even then, it's more of an illusion. A kind of psychological shelter baked into the scent of old meat, singed onions and scorched pots. You stagger in half asleep, blinking through the gaslight gloom, and find it already occupied. Two of your housemates are crouched near the stove, knees nearly touching the iron belly of the thing. One sipping from a tin mug. The other is just holding her hands close to the oven door, not even pretending to cook. No one talks. It's too early, and words might crack from the frost in your throat. You nod and ease onto the bench by the wall, stiff planks and all. The stove is old, a narrow cast-iron contraption with a firebox just big enough for a couple of coals and a single rusty pipe that dribbles smoke straight upward through the ceiling. It's barely lit, but compared to your room upstairs, it might as well be a tropical paradise. The kitchen serves many purposes, a place to cook, to hide, to gossip, to mend, to argue, to sleep, if no one catches you. But in winter, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes the heart of the house. You rise to check the pot. It's last night's dinner, if it can be called that. A thin stew of overboiled cabbage, slivers of turnip, and what might have once been beef, though the fat has long melted into the broth and vanished. You dip a spoon in and give it a taste. It's bitter, but it's warm, and in this house, warmth beats flavour every time. You remember reading once somewhere that Victorians considered boiled beef the pinnacle of a winter food. Not roast, not fried, not spiced, just boiled. Until the meat surrendered and the flavour dissolved into cloudy liquid. They'd even drink the beef tea on its own, especially if you were sick or constitutionally delicate. Apparently Charles Dickens swore by it. It wasn't just tradition, it was strategy. Boiling meat used less fuel than roasting. It fed more mouths, and it let you reheat the same pot for days on end, adding scraps and bones and calling it fresh. As the day brightens slightly, just a pale grey glow through the window, you watch your housemate crack an egg straight into her tea. Not her soup, her tea. It bobs there, yellow and gelatinous. She stirs it once and sips, nodding to herself like it's normal. You don't ask questions. Victorian winter kitchens are where logic goes to die. Another lodger slips in, hands full of dripping bread. The kind they sell half price just before closing, already stale, crusted in flour. He breaks it into chunks and toasts it on the end of a fireplace poker, turning it slowly over the coals. The smell fills the kitchen, burnt and sweet. He offers you a piece. You take it without speaking. You both know what this is, a quiet alliance. You munch the bread slowly, each bite like chewing a soggy roof tile, and yet it warms your mouth. It sits in your belly like a stone, and that's enough. The conversation finally starts, not about politics or literature or the price of soap. No, it's about cabbages. Specifically, who's got one, where they got it, and how frozen it was when they found it. The entire room begins to revolve around the prospect of vegetables. And why not? Vegetables mean soup. Soup means steam. Steam means heat. You glance at the walls, stained with decades of broth and bacon fat, and you feel oddly grateful. This kitchen may be filthy, cramped, and barely above freezing. But it's alive. The kitchen smells change as the morning drags on. The broth thickens. Someone adds barley. Someone else sneaks in a dried bay leaf like it's contraband. The stove creaks with protest as the coals burn low, but no one dares let it go out. You're all watching it now. like pilgrims around a sacred fire. It's not just about heat anymore, it's about hope, the illusion that a hot meal and a crowded room might be enough to hold off the cold gnawing at your ribs. You take your turn at the stove, stirring gently with a spoon, so bent it's more of a ladle now. The pot resists. The barley has bloated and clung to the bottom like damp gravel. Still, it's food. You scoop out 3 bowls, careful to keep the distribution even. Too much beef in one, and it's a declaration of war. Someone offers tea and someone else slams the cupboard in frustration. The tin is empty. Again. "Try the peelings," someone mutters, half serious. It's a running joke. Potato skin tea, a delicacy of the desperate. Just soak the skins in hot water, pretend it's herbal, and hold your nose. You chuckle under your breath. You've had worse. Around you, the kitchen fills with a new rhythm. Slurps, sighs, and the scrape of spoons on metal bowls. Someone coughs. Someone sneezes into a scarf. A draught from the hallway tries to slink in, but the crowd of bodies blocks most of it. Victorian homes were never built for winter. You'd think the British, experts at drizzle and gloom, would have mastered home heating by now. But most of the builders were more concerned with symmetry than insulation. And so kitchens like this became islands, warm, wet, and smelling faintly of coal and cabbage, floating in seas of frozen staircases and deadly bedrooms. One of the younger boys crouches near the stove and pulls a trick you've seen before. He lifts the front of his shirt and hikes the back up over the open oven door, catching the heat like a sail. It billows under his clothes and he lets out a low moan of contentment. "Careful you don't bake yourself," someone says, and there's actual laughter, thin and brittle, but real. You watch as a girl kneels and presses her skirted legs against the base of the stove, careful not to burn through the wool. For one long minute the room is still, warm, human, but then someone opens the outside door. A blast of wind stabs into the room like a thief with a knife. Everyone winces. The stove flinches. The girl at the floor shrieks and jerks away, clutching her thigh. Just steam, no burn. But the piece is broken. "Shut it, will you?" someone growls. The door slams. The warmth trickles back like a frightened animal. Someone mutters about rationing the fuel. The rest nod. It's decided without a word. No more coals till sunset. You've all learned to stretch the heat as far as it will go, like butter scraped across too much bread. The younger lodger grabs the last heel of toast and offers it around. No takers. He eats it in 2 bites. Then slowly the kitchen empties. Back to jobs or children or cleaning, or simply sitting somewhere else until nightfall. You stay behind a little longer, hands cradling the warm bowl like a lantern. Outside the cold waits. But for now, at least you've got cabbage, and barley, and half a matchbox of coals left. That's more than most. You head upstairs with a belly full of barley and boiling cabbage, the warmth trailing behind you like steam from a kettle. It won't last. Already your fingers tingle as the cold sinks back in. But it was a good hour. A warm hour. And that's rare enough in a Victorian winter to count as a small miracle. Time to dress for battle, again. There's an art to layering. You've learned this not from books or pamphlets, but from sheer survival. Wool doesn't touch the skin directly, it scratches too much. Linen first, then flannel, then wool. Over that, cotton if you have it, leather if you're lucky. The goal isn't fashion, it's containment. Heat is precious. You wear it like smuggled contraband. You start with the undergarments, stiff with last night's sweat and dry dampness. They smell a bit sour, but who doesn't? Then a shirt, greyish-white, fraying at the cuffs. Then the jumper, thick and brown and patched so many times it looks like a woolen map. Trousers next, lined with flannel, followed by your one decent waistcoat. It's missing a button, but nobody's counting. Then the layers that really matter. Shawl, scarf, coat, and, if you can find them, gaiters. Strange little contraptions buttoned over your lower legs somewhere between a sock and a straitjacket, mostly worn by postmen and errand boys. But you've taken a liking to them. They keep the wind from crawling up your ankles like a burglar. Your boots are the final challenge. They're dry now, barely, but the soles flap a bit and the leather is as stiff as parchment. You wrap your feet in rags, then slide them in and hope the heel doesn't detach today. You once heard about a man whose boot split right in front of the greengrocer's, and he spent the rest of the afternoon walking home with a cabbage tied to his foot. You tie a second scarf around your mouth, not for modesty, for insulation. Victorian fashion may have its quirks, but winter has no patience for vanity. You glance in the cracked mirror, now fogged from your own breath. What stares back isn't elegant. You look like a walking laundry pile, a bundle of cloth with eyes, but you're warm, mostly, and that's the only measure that counts. Downstairs the city is waiting, cold, wet, unforgiving, and you have to go out in it. Because while heat might be scarce in your room, it's not the only place to find it. The truly clever Victorians, those with empty pockets and hungry stoves, have learned to hunt heat like it's currency. And your next stop is wherever warmth leaks into the public. You step out, boots crunching the frozen mud. The street is already awake. Chimney stacks belch grey smoke into the pale sky, and people move like bundled ghosts past stalls and shops and carriages. Everyone's shoulders are hunched. Everyone breathes through scarves, and everyone's eyes scan for warmth. The bakery's a favourite, not to buy anything, just to stand near it. When they open the oven to slide in fresh loaves, a gust of heat wafts through the street like perfume. Sometimes, if you loiter long enough, they toss out the heel of a loaf, too burnt to sell. You've caught one before, ate it while it was still hot, crumbs scalding your tongue, one of the best meals you've had. Then there's the haberdashery. Pointless in summer, but in winter. Those gas lamps they keep lit for show. Very useful. You can press against the window, act like you're admiring the silk cravats, and let the heat soak into your cheekbones. Just don't fog up the glass too much, or the shopkeeper will come tapping with his cane. Public warmth, that's the secret. You just have to know where to find it. Your feet carry you toward Fleet Street, where the public libraries open early and grudgingly, especially in winter. They're not heated for comfort, mind you, just enough to keep the ink from freezing and the paper from curling into parchment. But for those of you who know the trick, the reading rooms offer a kind of warmth that can't be stolen or taxed. You push open the heavy doors, and the smell hits first. Dust, worn leather, coal smoke, and old ideas. The air is warmer than outside. Barely. But the chairs are padded and the walls are thick, and sometimes that's all you need. You nod to the librarian, who nods back but doesn't smile. He knows why you're here. So does everyone else in the room. An old woman in 3 shawls dozes over a copy of the Times. A boy pretends to read Pliny's Natural History, while covertly pressing his toes against a hot water pipe. Even a clerk from the insurance office is here, unbuttoning his coat with great ceremony as if to say, "Yes, I'm here for intellectual pursuits, not heat theft. Thank you very much." You grab a volume of something, anything thick, and sit near the corner where the pipe meets the floor. You pull your coat tighter, cross your arms, and hold perfectly still. Not to nap. That's not allowed. But to rest, to thaw, to become, for a brief half hour, a scholar of survival. Outside, the world is white and grey. Inside, it is sepia and quiet. You used to think warmth meant heat, but the Victorians taught you better. Warmth is also chairs with cushions, tea served at a pawnshop counter, a free seat on an omnibus where the bodies are packed tight enough to fog the windows. Warmth is a stolen moment under a gas lamp, the back corner of a bakery at closing time, the part of the public bathhouse that no one watches too closely. The omnibuses are another trick. 2p gets you a ride around the city in a solid 30 minutes of body heat, especially if you wedge between two larger riders. You learn to time your errands with bus routes. You pretend to get off, then hop on the return carriage. As long as you don't cause a fuss, the drivers usually don't care. They're cold too. But the prize location, the holy grail of heat theft, is the apothecary shop, not the front. That's too exposed. But the back counter, near the tonic racks, often has a discreet stove just big enough to keep the powders from clumping. You can fake an interest in cough syrup for 10, maybe 15 minutes, palms out near the warmth, until the chemist asks if you're ill. You usually say yes. He usually hands you a foul-smelling sample. You usually drink it. You emerge back into the street, slightly scorched by whatever root tincture you just swallowed, but a little warmer nonetheless. This is the strange choreography of the Victorian winter. You move between stations of warmth like a pilgrim, never staying too long, never asking too much. You've learned to collect heat like others collect coins, slowly, quietly, with reverence. And tonight, when you return to your frostbitten room, arms empty but heart still beating, you'll carry with you every borrowed degree of warmth, stored somewhere deep in your bones. Because when fire is rare, you learn to survive on memory. By now your fingers are cracked, not just dry, but split. Tiny red lines run like roads across your knuckles, each one stinging with cold and grime. You rub them absently as you walk, not to fix them, but just to feel something again. A strange thought crosses your mind. Your body isn't fighting winter anymore, it's negotiating with it. And what it wants right now is heat for your toes. You consider the options. Another ride on the omnibus? Maybe. A quick detour past the bakery's ash bin? Possibly. But nothing beats the primitive joy of something warm at your feet. And for that, you need a trick that even seasoned Victorians rarely admit out loud. You need a foot warmer. Not the fancy kind with brass handles and intricate engravings like the ones used in carriages by silk-gloved ladies. You're talking about the rough kind. A heated brick, a pan of coals, a smuggled lump of coke in a tin box shoved beneath a blanket. In some households, they use dried beans sewn into cloth and tossed near the hearth. Once warm, they hold the heat for hours. In others, especially out in the countryside, the answer is far stranger. A pig. Yes, a pig. Not for eating, for cuddling. It sounds mad until you remember that pigs have warm, dense bodies and don't complain when you curl up beside them. In rural homes, a child might sleep with a piglet in winter, its belly pressed against their feet, its snorts offering a rhythm steadier than any ticking clock. In cities, of course, that's harder to manage, but the idea remains: warmth by proximity. In your case, though, you have to improvise. You head back to your room and begin the ritual. You line the hearth with crumpled paper scraps and what little fuel you can spare. You place a small metal pan, an old biscuit tin really, above the coals and wait. When it starts to heat, you wrap it in cloth and slide it beneath your blanket. The effect is immediate. Not miraculous, but real. The ache in your feet starts to dull. The blood flows back in strange waves. You exhale like you've just been rescued. It's not elegant. It's not safe. And it smells vaguely of burnt raisins. But it works. Elsewhere, the methods get even weirder. Some ladies carry tin foot warmers in their muffs, those fuzzy tubes they keep their hands in, along with hot chestnuts or cork balls soaked in spirits. Men in frock coats have been known to tuck heated potatoes into their pockets, not for eating, but for palm warming during long carriage rides. One chimney sweep swore by keeping a boiled egg in each sock. "If they crack, you're walking too hard," he once said. Children invent their own solutions. A red woolen sock filled with sand. A tightly packed jar of soup. drunk slowly, held longer. One boy in your building filled his boots with crushed bricks, left them by the fire, and slipped them on glowing hot. He's got a blister the size of a walnut now, but he insists it was worth it. Because in this war against cold, everyone's a general, and everyone's tactics are strange. The biscuit tin under your blanket still radiates warmth, like a loyal pet that doesn't ask for food. You wiggle your toes, marvelling at how a small patch of heat can make you feel momentarily powerful, as if you've conquered something ancient. But you know better. Cold isn't something you defeat. It's something you dodge, outwit, delay, and the game resets every night. Across the hall you hear someone dragging something heavy. Probably Miss Elmore with her infamous coal footstool. It's a wooden box lined with tin filled with ashen embers, then slid beneath her kitchen chair. She'll sit there for hours reading by gaslight, knitting with trembling fingers, pretending she's in a drawing room instead of a boarding house with damp creeping up the walls. You've borrowed it once. Just once. The heat lasted nearly 4 hours, but she made you promise to return it without spilling any ash, and frankly it was more stress than it was worth. Downstairs, old Mr. Triggs is probably clanking about with his self-heating chair, a Frankenstein's monster of furniture. He hollowed out the seat, installed a coal pan, and lines the inside with bricks he bakes during the day. He claims it's the future of domestic comfort. You're not convinced. Last winter, he singed a hole in his trousers and had to go about with a curtain tied round his waist for a week. But everyone has their method. You once met a seamstress who stitched lavender into her mittens, not because it smelled nice, but because dried herbs retain heat surprisingly well. She'd warm them over the stove, slip them on, and work until her fingers could barely move. Her nails were purple with cold, but her stitches were always straight. Then there are the tricks from the streets. A hot brick wrapped in newspaper and shoved under a coat. Tin cans filled with embers and tied together like makeshift leg warmers. You saw a newsboy last week wearing a belt made of boiled potatoes. He'd tuck them into his waistband, keep his core warm, then eat them one by one as the day wore on. Ingenious and a little sad. At church on Sunday, you notice the ladies all have their feet raised subtly off the tile floor. Slates that cold could freeze the soles off a saint. One older woman has stacked hymnals beneath her boots. Another fans her skirts over a wicker basket, and when you lean over, you catch a whiff of hot cider. She's brought a jug to church. You nearly applaud. But the prize for strangest foot-warming goes to your landlord's niece, who you once spotted reading in the parlour with her legs tucked into a pillowcase of dry rice. She'd heat it in the oven, dash upstairs, and trap the warmth like a squirrel burying nuts. And you? Tonight you've got your biscuit tin. Your wool socks are slightly damp, your coat is folded across your knees, and your toes, blessedly, no longer ache. It's not luxury. It's not even safety. But it is, for now, enough. Outside, the frost thickens. The window glitters with frozen breath. But under the covers, in your nest of heat tricks and hand-me-down wool, you drift towards something almost resembling comfort. Because in the Victorian winter, true wealth isn't measured in gold or land or title. It's measured in the warmth that reaches your toes. There's a knock on the wall. Not a door, the wall. 3 soft taps, spaced just so. You pause, spoon halfway to your mouth, then 3 taps back. You've answered. It's not a secret code. Not really. Just a way for you and the tenant next door to say still alive. You've never formally met. You think her name might be Edith, or maybe Margaret. All you know is her stove creaks at the same hour each morning. Her cough sounds drier than yours, and she once passed you half a loaf through a gap in the stairwell when you had nothing to eat but a crust and cold tea. Tonight the knock means only one thing. Her fire's gone out. And if yours is still going, barely, weakly, but going, you know what you have to do. You wrap a wool scarf around the biscuit tin and cradle it like a newborn. Then you shuffle into the hall, avoiding the warped floorboard that screams like a banshee. 2 steps to the left, 1 forward, then knock. She opens the door a crack. Her nose is red, her gloves are off, her lips are blue. You hand her the wrapped tin. She doesn't speak, she just closes her fingers around it like it's treasure. For a few seconds, both of you just stand there in the doorway, misting frost into the air, and then you turn and leave. No thank you needed. You'll swap back in the morning, or maybe the next. This is how warmth travels when it can't be bought. Back in your room, you light the stub of a candle and sit beside the hearth. The coals are low again. You rake the ash and stir what's left into a small flicker. It won't last the night. But you've given away your heat before, and you'll do it again. 'Cause here's the truth about Victorian winters, what no etiquette book dares print. Every warm body owes its survival to someone else, and nowhere is that more apparent than the chimney corner. If you're lucky enough to have a hearth in your room, and not everyone is, it becomes your best friend and worst enemy. It demands coal. It smokes when it rains. It devours kindling like a hungry wolf. And yet, it's the only part of your room that ever glows. You slide your chair closer, as close as you dare, and press your boots against the iron grate. They sizzle slightly. The toe of your right boot steams. You should move it. You don't. The fire licks up, casting shadows against the cracked plaster. You watch them dance and think about all the people who've sat in that exact spot, hands outstretched, dreaming of something warmer than London in January. You think about the chimney sweeps who climb into these things, barely 10 years old, skin black with soot. About the widows who sleep upright in chairs when the bed's too cold. About the lodgers who burn furniture for fuel. Once, the tenant above you burned a chair leg in desperation. It smoked horribly, sap still in the wood, and left the entire hallway smelling like burnt varnish for days. But he didn't freeze that night. Sometimes that's enough. You sit back, feel the faint kiss of heat on your shins, and listen to the ticking of the cracked mantel clock. It's off by hours, but it ticks, and somehow that small sound makes the room feel less empty. You tell yourself, just keep the fire alive until midnight. You tell yourself, if it dies, it's fine. You'll manage. You tell yourself, you're one of the lucky ones. And maybe, in this strange cold city, you are. The problem with fires is that they lull you into a sense of safety. You start to believe the warmth will last, that maybe tonight you won't feel the frost creep in through the gaps in the floorboards, that perhaps just this once you've earned a proper night's sleep. But coals burn fast when they're poor. By midnight the glow has dulled to a sleepy red, pulsing faintly like the last ember of a dying star. You rake it again, gently, hopefully, but there's not much left to coax. The ash stirs, the glow flickers once, then settles, and that's that. You could go out again, knock on someone else's door, barter for sawdust, but you don't. Because you know the truth. They're all in the same state as you, even the ones who seem better off, even the ones with curtains over their doors and fewer cracks in the walls. They've just learned to hide their freezing better, so you retreat to the chair, wrapping yourself in every layer you own. You even tug the curtain from the window and drape it around your shoulders, feeling a ridiculous sort of power in it, like a bedraggled monarch wearing moth-eaten velvet. Your boots stay on, so do your gloves. Sleep becomes a negotiation, not a guarantee. You stare at the chimney. It leaks heat even when the fire is out. Not much, but enough to keep the walls around it a few degrees warmer. You scoot your chair closer and rest your head against the side. The bricks are cool, but not icy. You close your eyes, and then, thump. The sound comes from inside the chimney. You jolt upright, heart skidding into your throat. Another thump, then a sharp scritch-scratch, like something scraping at the bricks. You hold your breath. It could be a bird, it could be wind, it could be the chimney shifting as the outside air freezes deeper. But then comes a cough, a ragged, human cough, and you know what it is. It's a climbing boy. Somewhere above you, tangled in the flue, brushing out soot in the black of night. Maybe working late for extra pennies, maybe stuck, maybe both. Chimney sweeps didn't stop for weather. If anything, they worked more in winter. People needed fires cleared, flues unblocked, ash emptied. Even if it meant sending a child barely 10 years old up a 2-foot-wide shaft in the dark. You listen as the scraping grows softer. He's moving upward, slowly, carefully. You wonder if he's cold. Of course he is. You wonder if he has a coat. You doubt it. You close your eyes again and feel a bitter pang somewhere behind your ribs. Not just pity, but recognition. The kind that only exists between people who've been cold together, even if they never meet. When you wake, the chimney is silent, the hearth is cold, your neck hurts from the angle of the chair, and your fingers have gone pale beneath the gloves. But you're still here. Somewhere upstairs, someone opens a window and coughs. Somewhere downstairs, a kettle begins to hiss. And across the thin wall next to you, the knock comes again. 3 taps. You answer. 3 back. Still alive. The morning light comes sideways through the frost on your window, casting crooked little prisms on the cracked plaster wall. You've learned not to trust it. Light doesn't mean warmth in winter. Not in London. All it means is that the cold is now visible. You stretch slowly, painfully, limbs stiff from the curled position you'd held in the chair all night. Your knees crack. Your back protests. The biscuit tin is long cold. The coals are dead, and your mouth tastes like burnt wool and boiled cabbage. Time to get dressed. Again. But this time, there's no rush. Today's not a work day. No errands. No coal to chase. Just the daily quest for heat and the strangest battlefield of them all. Fashion. You open the trunk at the foot of the bed. Inside is your armoury. Layers of garments that have long since given up trying to match. Shawls that smell like pipe smoke. Undershirts that used to belong to someone larger. A pair of men's woolen trousers 2 sizes too wide, held up with a knotted belt made from curtain cord. The layers go on not for style, but for strategy. Because in Victorian London, clothing isn't just about modesty or status, it's your insulation. You start, as always, with flannel, scratchy, grey and eternally damp around the cuffs. Then a second layer, another shirt, this one with buttons half missing. Then the corset if you wear one, which feels absurd over all the bulk. But it traps heat surprisingly well. Then petticoats, wool skirt, stockings, gaiters, boots, shawl, scarf, coat, gloves, hat. You're now a walking duvet, and yet somehow still cold. You think of the wealthier folk trussed up in their tailored coats and fur-trimmed boots, ladies with muffs lined in rabbit fur hiding hot bricks inside, gentlemen with silk waistcoats under their wool, the kind with hand-warming pockets sewn directly into the lining. But wealth doesn't always mean sense. You pass a woman on the street in a satin dress that clings like frost to her ankles. She's shivering beneath a decorative shawl, thin lace, utterly useless. Her boots are pretty, with dainty buttons and heels like pencils. You watch her slip on the pavement and catch herself against a lamppost, nearly twisting her ankle. Even in the cold, fashion demands sacrifice. Back in your world, practicality reigns. That's why you've wrapped a knitted scarf around your middle. It used to be an old stocking. Now it's a kind of belly wrap that keeps your core warm while leaving your arms free to work. You've learned to layer skirts with newspapers if needed. No one sees beneath your hem anyway. A boy you know swears by lining his boots with pages from the Times. Says it wicks moisture and keeps the toes from going numb. He can quote headlines off his heel. And there's a girl down the lane who wears bloomers under her dress stuffed with goose feathers. She stitched them herself. They rustle when she walks like a marching duck, but she says she hasn't had chilblains since. You step outside, wrapped like a Victorian onion, and the wind cuts straight through you anyway. Because it's not just what you wear, it's what you do with it. The cold isn't just in the air, it's in the clothes themselves. Your coat crunches at the elbows when you move. Your scarf, once soft, now scratches like old rope. Even your boots, loyal and cracked, have frozen into a particular curve, and your feet must conform to their mood or suffer the consequences. As you walk, you spot others in similar padded misery. A man in a top hat with the brim frozen stiff. A nursemaid with woolen socks pulled over her gloves. A delivery boy with a coat made from stitched-together potato sacks. His shoulders hunch so high it looks like his head is shrinking into them. Victorian winter fashion is not graceful. It's bulky. There's nothing elegant about 6 overlapping layers of fabric and a bonnet tied so tight your chin goes numb. But in this city, warmth trumps grace every time. You pass a girl who's crying because her corset snapped from the cold. The boning, whalebone, brittle when frozen, cracked clean through and poked out like a splintered rib. She's trying to hide it under her shawl while a shop assistant offers her a safety pin and a sip of something hot. It's not vanity, it's dignity. In another corner, a tailor is showcasing a new product, a wool-lined crinoline. Guaranteed to hold heat and hold shape, he proclaims to no one in particular. You chuckle. A steel cage skirt filled with sheep's wool sounds more like a torture device than a fashion statement, but someone will buy it. You find a bit of warmth by ducking into a hallway near the apothecary. You pull off your gloves just long enough to rub your palms together. They're pink, raw, and peeling in places. A fringe of ice clings to the fringe of your scarf. You glance at the puddle near the wall and notice it's no longer liquid. Even the leaks have frozen. And this, more than anything, is what you wear in winter. Not just fabric, but signs of defeat. Frost in your cuffs, ice in your breath, salt stains on your boots, a threadbare glove with the thumb re-sewn for the 3rd time. But there's a strange solidarity in it, a fashion of resilience. Everyone you pass wears the same marks of survival, the soot-smeared hems, the mismatched mittens, the hats pulled down too low over red ears. You catch sight of yourself in a fogged shop window. You look like a bundle of everything you own. Your silhouette is shapeless, your eyes sunken, your expression blank. But you're warm enough to keep walking, and in this city, that's the whole point. Besides, there are tricks you haven't tried yet. A slice of lard spread inside your gloves. A handkerchief wrapped around your neck soaked in gin to give the illusion of heat. A chunk of hot turnip carried in your pocket and squeezed like a talisman. You once heard of a woman who carried a spoonful of mustard under her tongue all day just to keep her core warm. The logic is questionable, but then so is survival. You pull your scarf tighter and walk on. The wind sneaks into your layers like an unwanted memory, but you smile anyway, because in your own way, in your bundle of patchwork and soot, you're dressed for battle, and the cold hasn't beaten you yet. You've always known that some people in this city are colder than others. Not colder in attitude, though Londoners certainly have that reputation, but colder in body, colder in circumstance. And no one knows this better than the servants. Their cold doesn't end when they leave the street. It follows them inside. You step through the tradesman's entrance of a grand townhouse, the kind with wrought iron gates and polished brass knockers, and immediately the temperature drops. Not because the house is unheated, it most certainly is, but because the warmth stops where the wealth stops. The drawing room upstairs may be glowing with gaslight and velvet curtains drawn tight, but down here, in the servants' quarters, the walls sweat and the floors freeze. You pass the scullery maid. She's kneeling by a bucket of icy water, red arms elbow deep in yesterday's dishes. Her sleeves are rolled up to the elbows because otherwise they'd freeze solid. The steam rising from the pail makes her eyes water, but it's not enough to warm her. She blinks and sniffs, sleeves soaked, knuckles cracked. "Warm water's for upstairs," she says flatly, and you know she's not joking. In these townhouses, the kitchen sits below ground next to the coal cellar. It stays damp year-round. In winter, it becomes a kind of refrigerated tomb. You can see your breath. The walls drip, and despite the open flame on the range, your feet stay cold because the stone floor leaches the heat right out of your bones. The cook stomps in, boots clomping on wet stone, and mutters about the larder door freezing shut again. She's got a sack of flour over one shoulder and a bad temper over the other. Her apron is scorched in one spot and damp in the rest. Even her bonnet looks miserable. "Don't stand about," she growls, and you start moving, not even sure what your job is today. You haul buckets of coal up to the second floor hearths, one at a time, boots slipping on the stairs. The handle bites your palm with cold. By the third trip you can't feel your fingers. By the fourth you stop noticing. Meanwhile upstairs the fire blazes in the parlour. You catch a glimpse as the door opens, rugs so thick your boots would vanish in them. The maid who brings in the tea is flushed pink from the heat. She frowns at you, probably for dripping soot on the hall rug, and you step back into the corridor of cold like a criminal. This is how it is. Warmth is for guests. Cold is for the ones who carry it. Later, in the laundry room, the linens are frozen stiff. Literally. You could snap a pillowcase in two. The washerwoman swings it against the wall to loosen it, then drapes it over a line near the stove which smokes but doesn't warm. You help wring out sheets until your knuckles swell. Someone sings a hymn softly, just to stay awake. You join in, off-key and wheezing, but no one complains, because the song helps. A little. By afternoon your sleeves are soaked, not with sweat. No one sweats in this cold, but with the damp mist of chores, steam from pots, splash from basins, the drip of laundry half-thawed and weeping from its own stiffness. You smell like lye soap and scorched starch, and your back aches in that deep, bone-dragging way that only comes from work done while cold. You try warming your hands near the kitchen range, but the fire is reserved for cooking, not comfort. The cook slaps your wrist with a wooden spoon. "Don't waste the heat," she snaps, and you flinch. So you head to the coal cellar. It's dark down here. Always is. Your breath fogs in front of your face, catching on the beam of candlelight like ghost smoke. The walls are lined with coal sacks, some half spilled, others torn open by rats or rough handling. The air is thick with dust, clings to your skin, coats your tongue, turns your nostrils black. You don't dare sneeze. Not because it's impolite, but because it will feel like inhaling ash. You fumble for the shovel and load another sack, one lump at a time. This coal isn't for you. It's for the master's study upstairs, where the drapes are drawn, where a snifter of brandy steams gently on the table, where the flames crackle in a tiled fireplace with a brass grate polished every morning. Your fingers bleed through the gloves. You don't feel it till later. When your shift ends, you climb the servant stairs again. Narrower, steeper, designed so that you're out of sight from the real people. The cold air up here is different. Drier. It stings your skin like vinegar on a wound. You make your way to the attic. Your room is barely a room. Just enough space for a narrow bed, a chipped chamber pot, and a trunk for your clothes. There's a small window crusted with frost, and a draught that hisses through the floorboards. You stuff a rag under the door and hope it helps. Some houses let servants sleep in the warmest part of the home, near the kitchen perhaps, but in this one, heat rises, and your place is as far from the hearth as physically possible. You wrap yourself in your coat and curl up on the bed, shoes still on. You're too tired to undress. Your breath fogs the air above your lips. You press your hands beneath your arms to warm them and wait for the shivers to settle. Across the hall, someone coughs, then another. You wonder if they're the same person, or if the cold has synchronized your suffering. You remember stories you've heard, servants in the grandest houses so desperate for heat, they'd sneak into empty guest rooms just to lie on the hearth for a few minutes. Some were caught, punished. One girl was dismissed without a reference for boiling a single egg over the drawing room fire. She said it was worth it, and you believe her. Because when your whole life is built around other people's comfort, the smallest flame feels like rebellion. You lie back. The bed creaks. You pull the blanket up over your nose and think about the hearths you've cleaned, the fires you've carried, the warmth you've delivered, and how little of it was ever meant for you. And somehow, in that frozen little box of a room, that thought burns the most. Sometimes the warmest places in London aren't inside homes at all. They're in the strangest corners of the public world, places that weren't designed for comfort, but accidentally became sanctuaries for the freezing. And once you learn where they are, you start to see them like secret doorways. You leave the house early today, not because you need to, because you need to move. When you stop moving, the cold sets in like cement, so you wrap yourself in your layers, double knot your boots, and head out. Not toward a destination, but toward a route of warmth. First stop the corner tobacconist. Not to smoke, you can't afford that. But the shop is small, always lit, and always 5 degrees warmer than the street. You stand inside, pretending to study the labels on the matchboxes. You nod politely at the clerk, who knows exactly what you're doing. Looking for something strong, he asks with a twitch of the eyebrow. You grin. Just browsing. Next, you head for the print shop. The press boys work fast, ink-stained and loud, and the presses pump out more heat than you'd expect. It's the friction, you think, or maybe just the sheer effort of producing so many papers. You linger near the door, pretending to read the headlines on the sheets as they dry on racks. Need a job? One boy asks. He's not offering. You shake your head and move on. Then there's the best spot, the omnibus depot. You time it just right. Shift change. The drivers and porters are swapping places, the horses are being rubbed down with burlap, and the break room, if you can call it that, is full of steam and saddle soap and half-frozen laughter. You ease in like you belong. No one stops you. You press against the far wall, where the stove sits squat and black in the corner. It's surrounded by gloves laid out like starfish, steaming mittens, wet socks draped over a rod. Someone's toasting bread directly on the metal, and the scent of singed crust hits you like a memory. You sit on an upturned crate and hold out your hands. This is borrowed heat. No one says so, but everyone knows. No one stays longer than 20 minutes. You take your turn. You thaw your fingers. You rub your ears till they ache. And then, when you've had enough to remember what your knuckles feel like, you nod your thanks and leave. Because the next person is already waiting to take your place. Out in the streets again, your face is flushed from the sudden shift. Your breath fogs. You tuck your chin down and head to the next stop, the haberdasher's window. It's not about entering. It's about standing near the glass. The lamps inside throw just enough heat to warm your cheeks if you lean close. The mannequins in the window are dressed better than you'll ever be. Lace gloves, velvet coats, brass buttons polished to shine like coins. But you don't look at them. You look at the steam curling upward from the inside sill and close your eyes. For 1 minute, you could be anywhere. For 1 minute, you're not freezing. You linger by the window a bit too long. Inside, the clerk narrows his eyes. He knows the signs. The scarf drawn up too high. the fingertips pressed just a little too close to the pain, the shifting from foot to foot that's not impatience but numbness turning back into pain. He steps forward, slowly, deliberately, like a schoolmaster about to rap your knuckles. You step back before he gets the chance to raise his hand. You nod politely, as if you've been browsing, as if you're not half frozen and living on flickers of heat that don't belong to you. He doesn't follow. They rarely do. They just want you gone. You head toward the next best stop, the penny reading room. You've got just enough in your pocket for entry, and the room is heated by charity and civic pride. Inside there's a dull red stove in the centre, tall and cast iron, with vents that hiss gently every few minutes like it's sighing from the weight of everyone's expectations. You sit in the back by the stack of week-old newspapers. They're stiff with cold and slightly damp, but no one's here to read. Everyone is here for the warmth. The woman across from you is knitting something that doesn't look like it'll be finished before spring. A man with threadbare gloves is pretending to read the Times upside down. The boy near the stove has both hands pressed flat against the metal pipe, wincing from the heat, but refusing to move. No one speaks. The only sound is the ticking of the clock and the faint rustle of paper shifting as bodies breathe. The room smells faintly of old boots, ink and wet wool. But for a moment, it's bearable. You take off your gloves, a risky luxury. Your fingers tingle as they thaw, the blood rushing back in angry waves. You stretch them, flex them, rub your palms together. You place them close to the stove, not touching, never touching, and feel something like life returning to your limbs. The stove isn't even that hot, it's just not frozen, and that's enough. You stay until the hour's up. The clerk will ring the bell soon, and there'll be a shuffle of motion, people quietly resigning themselves to the return of the cold. You gather your things, gloves back on, hat tugged low. You don't want to leave, but you know the routine. No one overstays. No one abuses the flame. It's a code. Outside again, the air bites hard. The sun is already fading, pulling its weak light toward the rooftops. Your coat feels heavier now, damp from the thaw and refrozen at the hem. But your hands? They're still warm. Slightly. Briefly. You pass a bakery and don't stop this time. The queue is too long. People pressed against the wall, hands cupped around cheap pasties, trying to trap the heat in their chests before it escapes into the air. One woman is feeding a pie to her baby straight from the bag, both of them steaming gently like livestock in a stable. You keep walking, because you have one more stop. At the end of the street is St. Margaret's Church, and while the sermons are bone dry, the pews are warm, heated from underneath by iron grates that push up a blessed waft of hot air. You don't even believe in much, but today, you kneel when you enter, not for God, for the furnace. You've been in cold classrooms before, but never quite like this. The room smells of ink and mildew. The windows are covered in frost, and your breath fogs the air in little clouds that linger too long. You sit at a desk made of splintered oak, one leg shorter than the others, and every time you shift it wobbles like a drunkard. The seat is harder than the floor, and colder. You stretch your fingers before dipping your pen into the inkwell, only to discover the ink is frozen. Again! Around you, 20 other children, some half your age, some twice, rub their hands, blow into their cupped palms, and pretend to be paying attention. The teacher is bundled in a woolen coat so thick he looks like a taxidermied bear. He stomps his feet every few minutes, not out of anger, but to keep the blood flowing. The slate on your desk has a thin layer of frost that resists your chalk like skin resisting a blade. You scratch out your figures, trying not to break the stick. The boy beside you sneezes and leaves a streak of snot across his sleeve. No one blinks. In winter, education becomes a test of physical endurance. The only heat in the room comes from a small cast-iron stove near the front, but it's been out since yesterday. Coal was promised. Coal didn't arrive. No one explains why. You've learned not to ask. Sometimes the coal disappears on the way. Sometimes it gets sold. Sometimes the man who delivers it just doesn't show up. And when that happens, the cold comes in like a school inspector, checking every corner, every toe. You tap your foot against the floor to wake it up. Your boot's gone stiff again. The girl behind you has wrapped her shawl over her knees and is trying to balance a slate on top, writing from under the layers like a miner sketching in the dark. And the worst part, you want to learn. You really do. You just can't feel your hands. Every word you scratch into the slate takes effort, not because you're tired, because the chalk keeps slipping from fingers that feel more like wood than flesh. You pause, blow on your hands, then try again. You blink hard to stay focused. The ink might be frozen, but your ambition isn't. At the front of the room, the teacher drones on about Latin roots, each syllable forming a puff of mist as it leaves his mouth. He pauses occasionally to swig something from a flask, wipes his nose with a handkerchief, and keeps going. You respect his dedication. Or maybe it's stubbornness. Or maybe he has nowhere warmer to be. Someone drops their slate. It shatters. No one laughs. You look down at your own and run your gloved thumb across the surface, wiping away the chalk and leaving a faint trail of moisture behind. And then, for a moment, a miracle. A curl of smoke, thin and hesitant. But it's real. The teacher must have found a scrap of coal, or maybe a few sticks. The stove coughs once, then starts to hum. The room doesn't warm right away, but every child lifts their head, like plants, turning toward the sun. It's enough to finish your lesson. Barely. The warmth from the stove never quite makes it to the back of the room, but it doesn't matter. The idea of heat is often just as powerful. You lean slightly forward on your desk, angling your knees toward the faint flow of rising air. Your toes twitch, hopeful. Around you, the atmosphere shifts, not in temperature, but in spirit. Shoulders unhunch, faces unfreeze. One boy dares to take off his hat. Another removes a mitten and flexes his fingers as if remembering he has them. The chalk begins to glide a little more easily. For a few minutes, the class becomes something close to normal. Lessons proceed. Pens scratch. A girl in the front raises her hand and actually smiles as she answers. You almost forget how cold it was an hour ago. Almost. Because then comes the cough. It echoes from the far corner, a deep, rattling bark. The boy, 2 rows over, hunches into his collar, eyes wide. He's the smallest one in the class, always pink-cheeked, always silent. His lips are tinged blue. The teacher looks up but says nothing. What can he say? There's no doctor, no nurse, no blanket. Only a stove, a stack of slates, and the creeping dread that comes every winter when the weak begin to cough. You remember last year. 2 students stopped showing up. No explanation, just empty seats. The rest of the class got quieter, more careful, as if the chill might hear them speaking and come for them next. You shift in your chair and pull your scarf up over your nose. The lesson ends with a bell, a sharp clang that startles more than it signals. Desks scrape, boots thump, no one lingers. You file out into the corridor where the stone floor feels even colder after the brief taste of heat. Outside, the wind has picked up again. Your friend Mary waits by the door, her satchel pressed to her chest. She grins, teeth chattering. "Did you see that flame?" she asks. You nod. "Thought it was a dream," she adds. You both laugh, weak and breathy, and step into the street together, shoulders bumping through the crowd of departing students. One boy walks backwards, hands cupped behind him like he's trying to catch the warmth he left behind. As you pass the schoolhouse chimney, you spot the thin line of smoke still curling into the pale sky, a single grey thread against the yellow-white light of the late afternoon. You imagine what it must be like in a proper school, a wealthy school, with carpets and radiators and fresh ink. You heard once about a classroom where each desk had its own gas lamp, where the floors were waxed, where the windows closed properly. But you don't envy them. Not really. Because there's something earned about this place. Something quiet and strong about learning through the freeze, about sharing heat-like secrets, about finishing your sums while your fingers go numb. You reach the corner and say goodbye to Mary. She heads home to a basement flat with steam pipes, from the bakery above. You walk in the other direction toward your attic room with its stiff blanket and biscuit tin, and as you climb the stairs later that night, you smile, because the ink thawed today, and that's enough. You've wrapped yourself in every layer you own, yet your legs still sting with cold, not just from the air, but from your own poor decisions, because today you made the mistake nearly every Victorian has made at least once in their lives. You dressed for fashion, not survival. It began innocently. You were heading out to visit someone. Nothing grand, just a neighbour's birthday tea, but still, you wanted to look like you hadn't spent the morning scraping frost off your pillow, so you made a choice. You wore the nice coat, the thinner one, the one with the elegant buttons, the tailored waist, the rich navy wool that whispers respectability, and absolutely no lining. You left your thick, ugly greatcoat hanging by the door like a coward, and you pulled on the stylish boots instead. The ones with the narrow toe and barely their heel. The ones that pinch a little when it's warm, and a lot when it's not. And of course, you skipped the extra shawl. It didn't match the rest of your outfit. Big mistake. By the time you reached the first street corner, you could already feel the chill seeping in through the seams of your sleeves. By the second, your ankles had gone numb, and by the time you got to the square, your entire lower half had vanished into a kind of numb, fashionable fog. You told yourself it was worth it. You walked like everything was fine. You smiled. You sat at that cold, draughty table sipping lukewarm tea, pretending not to notice the condensation forming on your plate. You even tried to make polite conversation until your host leaned in and whispered, "You look quite flushed, dear. Are you feverish?" No, you were freezing. Now, back at home, the consequences settle in. You peel off the elegant boots. Your toes are pale, almost waxy. You poke one gently. It doesn't respond. You mutter a prayer to St. Thomas's Hospital and fetch a bowl of lukewarm water, dipping your feet in slowly. Too fast and the pain will be unbearable. Too slow and you risk damage. Chilblains, that's the word. An ugly little souvenir from a beautiful little outfit. Victorian medicine offers plenty of remedies. Rub them with goose fat, apply mustard poultices, soak in vinegar and pepper. One woman swears by rubbing her feet with raw onions, another by keeping a hot potato in each boot. You try none of these. You just sit there, watching the pink creep slowly back into your skin and curse the day fashion ever existed. Because this is the thing. Victorian clothing was not designed for winter, especially not women's clothing. Stiff corsets that don't allow layers underneath. Skirts that drag through icy puddles and freeze stiff. Bodices cut too low, sleeves too short, shoes made for posture, not protection. It's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. You think of the young maids you've seen walking to chapel on Sundays, cloaks barely covering their shoulders, hands tucked beneath the elbows, faces red and blotchy from the wind. They walk tall, they walk proud, but they suffer. Because being presentable is not the same as being warm. And in this city, those two things rarely come together. You're still sitting by the basin, legs tucked under a blanket, steam rising weakly from your chilled feet, when a knock comes at the door. You shuffle over, trailing the wool like a bedraggled queen, and open it just a crack. It's Annie from down the hall, cheeks wind-chapped, scarf soaked, one glove missing. She grins. "Do you have any camphor oil?" she asks. "Or at least something that smells convincing?" You blink, confused. "For my boots," she clarifies. "Going out to see that grocer's boy I mentioned. Can't feel my toes, but I'd rather smell like medicine than look like I've got frostbite." You laugh and let her in. She sits cross-legged on the floor, pulls off her boots, and holds up her feet. They're raw, mottled purple at the edges, and she winces when the air touches them. "What possessed you to go out in those?" you ask, nodding at the boots. "They're the only pair that don't squeak," she replies. You hand her a cracked jar of something that vaguely resembles balm. It might be camphor. It might be lard mixed with peppermint. Hard to tell anymore. She smears it on like she's icing a cake. "This city," she mutters, "will kill you for trying to look decent." You both nod. It's the quiet truth of winter fashion in Victorian London. Vanity is a gamble. Some lose fingers for the sake of a slim glove. Others trade warmth for elegance and pay in chilblains and cracked lips. You remember stories of women fainting in the street, not from hunger, but from corsets pulled too tight over wool underlayers, their ribs squeezed by both ice and lace. And then there are the gentlemen. Oh, they have their own absurdities. Tall top hats that trap no heat. Gloves so thin they may as well be painted on. Waistcoats made of polished cotton. Beautiful, yes, but they chill instantly in the wind. You once saw a banker slip on the ice, too proud to admit his feet were frozen stiff in polished shoes. He cracked a tooth on the curb and walked away like nothing happened. But perhaps the most foolish fashion of all belongs to the boys trying to impress girls, and the girls trying to impress everyone else. Thin coats, no scarves, hair lacquered stiff despite the sleet. You've even seen stockings rolled down on purpose, just to show off a new pair of ankle boots. One girl boasted about her frostbitten toes like medals from a war. You and Annie sit in silence for a while, watching her feet regain their shape. Then she wraps them in spare rags, pulls her boots back on, and ties the laces twice around the ankles. "Not warm," she says, standing slowly, "but convincing." You nod, holding out a scrap of wool to tuck behind her collar. "Your nose is still red," you say. She grins. "Let's pretend it's fashionable." She disappears back into the hall, and you close the door gently behind her. Back at your basin, the water's gone cold. Your feet are dry now, still tender, but whole. You pull on your thickest socks, ugly things, riddled with holes, and slip your feet into last winter's boots, the ones that squeak terribly, but never freeze. You smile, because tonight you've decided to survive, and survival, in this city, is always in style. There's something worse than cold. It's damp, not wet exactly. Not the honest miserable wet of rain-soaked boots or a basin that's sloshed over. No, this is the kind that creeps. It hides in the corners, it lives in your walls, your sheets, your very bones. You feel it before you see it. A kind of slow, sticky chill that clings to your skin and never quite lets go. You wake up to it. Your blanket is heavy, not from warmth, but from moisture. The edges are clammy. Your pillow feels slick. You sit up and the damp rises with you, ghosting off the walls and whispering through the floorboards. You press your palm to the windowsill and it comes away shining. Not from frost, from condensation. This is a London winter in its truest form. Not just freezing, but soaking cold. Cold that doesn't crackle or sting, but sinks. Downstairs, the hallway wallpaper is peeling in slow curls. You run your fingers over it sometimes, watching flakes come away like ancient bark. The ceiling in the washroom has spots that bloom black and fuzzy, no matter how often someone scrubs it. Last week, a patch of plaster gave up entirely and collapsed onto the stairwell with a wet thump. You step into your boots and wince. They never dried properly. They haven't in weeks. Every time you wear them, you're re-wetting your socks with yesterday's foot sweat. You try stuffing them with newspaper, but even the paper gives in, goes limp, turns soft and starts to smell like mildew. You think of the houses built better than this. Houses with stone fireplaces that heat all the rooms, not just one. With floors above the floodline, with carpets thick enough to drink the cold before it reaches your toes. You think of windows that actually close and don't rattle like teeth in a skull when the wind picks up. Your building is not one of those houses. It's a sponge with a roof. You wrap your scarf twice around your neck, not for warmth, but to shield the smell. There's always a faint scent of rot now. Old water, damp wood, spoiled fabric. The smell of a place slowly losing its fight against nature. Someone down the hall has laid bricks along the floor to keep their mattress from soaking up water. You tried that too, until the bricks grew moss, and your skin, it itches constantly. Your sleeves rub against your arms, and you swear your bones feel soggy. There's a rash spreading under your collar that no salve seems to soothe. You've heard horror stories about this kind of damp, how it creeps into joints, lodges in lungs, turns healthy skin to sores. One old sailor told you damp was worse than frostbite. At least frost kills quickly. Damp lingers. It turns your clothes into mouldy armour. It takes your soap and turns it into jelly. It takes your food and spoils it before you can eat it. But worst of all, it steals heat. You light the fire, feed it with dry scraps you've begged, bartered, and hidden from the cook. But the flame doesn't crackle. It hisses. Steam rises from the hearthstones. The damp fights back, and it usually wins. The fire finally catches, but it doesn't roar. It sulks. A low, reluctant burn that barely flickers and seems to spend more effort drying out the hearth than heating the room. The coals crackle softly, not with warmth, but with frustration. You sit beside it anyway, huddled in your greatcoat, watching the steam rise off your sleeves. You're not even wet technically. You're just saturated, like the whole world is. You remember when you first noticed it wasn't just the cold, but the damp. It was the day your bread grew a coat of green overnight. Or maybe the time your only dry handkerchief turned to mush in your coat pocket before you ever used it. Or perhaps it was when the book by your bed began to warp, its spine arching like it wanted to flee the shelf entirely. And it's not just your things, it's you. Your hair never quite dries, your socks never smell clean. Your shoulders ache not from effort, but from a constant low-grade shiver that never seems to stop. You hear it in other people too, in the crackle of a cough from the stairwell, the creak of joints that sound too loud for someone that young. In a city where coal is currency, dryness is luxury. You once met a woman who swore by baking her shoes every morning in the oven, not to warm them, but to dehydrate them. She claimed her chilblains disappeared when her soles were crisp enough to snap. You laughed at the time. Now you're not so sure she was wrong. There are tricks, of course. Talcum powder shaken liberally into gloves and boots. Soap left unwrapped to absorb the damp from drawers. An old shoemaker down the lane swears by stuffing boots with burnt barley. It draws out the moisture, he says, and makes the leather pliable again. Smells like porridge, but the boots don't squeak. You once caught a man ironing his socks, not to press them, but to chase the moisture out like a ghost. He used a brick wrapped in foil, heated directly in the stove. Clever, if a bit singed. You consider it. Anything to feel dry again. Because the damp doesn't just steal heat, it messes with your mind. It makes time feel slower. It erodes your patience. It seeps into your sleep, giving you restless dreams of dripping ceilings and endless puddles. You once dreamed your bed floated down the Thames. You woke to find it soaked from the corner seam where the roof had wept a little in the night. Even laughter is damp in winter. short, breathy, cautious. You try to smile at the absurdity of it all. Your socks steaming by the fire like boiled potatoes, your gloves hung from a chair like limp fish. But the smile doesn't last long. Still, you endure. You blot your sleeves with a rag. You poke the fire again. You line your boots with folded newspaper. You eat your bread quickly before the damp finds it. And then you sit very still. Not to rest, but to avoid stirring up the cold again. In this house, movement invites moisture. Stillness traps what little dryness you've managed to create. You close your eyes. You tell yourself the sky will clear tomorrow. You tell yourself the sun might visit your windowsill. You tell yourself this damp, like all things in London, will pass. And you wait for something, anything, to feel crisp again. You've patched the windows. You've stuffed cloth under the door. You've sealed the chimney flue when the fire's not in use. And still, the wind finds you. It doesn't howl. That would be easier. At least you could curse it, shut it out, fight back with a thick quilt and a hot brick. But no, this draft sneaks. It glides over floorboards, curls behind your ears, snakes up your sleeves just when you're starting to feel safe, and you're not imagining it. In every Victorian home, rich or poor, there's something more feared than frost, the invisible hand of the draft. They call them creeping chills. You remember the first time you felt it, sitting near the hallway with a cup of tea, layered in shawls and wool. And then suddenly, a chill up the spine, so sharp, so deliberate, it felt like a finger running along your neck. You spun around. Nothing. No open window, no visible crack. But it was there, and you've been fighting it ever since. You start with the keyholes. Everyone gets a plug. Paper, wax, even bits of fabric jammed in tightly. You once tried chewed bread in desperation, until it moulded by morning. Still, it blocked the wind for a few glorious hours. The windows are next. You've lined the frames with newspaper, sealed the seams with lard soap and tape. But Victorian glass is no match for a London winter. It rattles with every gust. The panes are so thin you can hear the wind scratching against them like a cat wanting in. Your friend Maggie, clever girl, hangs wet laundry on her windows in winter. Not to dry it, but to trap the draft. She says if the sheets freeze, she knows the seal isn't tight enough. It's worked better than any drapery. In some households, they take more creative measures. One man you met kept a sack of flour by the window and checked each morning for a powder trail on the floor, proof of air leaking through the frame. If he found one, he'd patch it with tar and toast crumbs. You don't question the logic anymore. You've learned there's no such thing as overreacting to a draft. They're not just unpleasant, they're dangerous. Some swear creeping chills can kill a man as surely as starvation. One gust through the back of the neck, and by morning he's coughing blood. Some say it starts in the knees, cold wind through the joints, leading to months of stiffness, swelling, and sudden collapse. Got the chill, they whisper, like it's a curse. Your landlady once claimed she saw a draft in her bedroom, a wisp of silver moving against the gaslight. She now sleeps with 3 hats and a sack of hot oats at her feet. You understand. You hang an old rug over your bedroom door, pin an apron to the window frame, and sleep with your head under the blanket even when it gets damp from your own breath. You don't care. Anything to block the chill, but somehow, still, it finds you. The draft tonight is particularly cunning. It doesn't come through the door or the window or the chimney. No, this one slips under the floorboards, rises like a ghost through the cracks between the planks, and settles right beneath your knees as you sit by the fire. A subtle, icy presence, the kind that makes your bones ache long before you notice the room's grown colder. You tuck your legs beneath yourself, not comfortable, but strategic. Every movement now is about reducing exposure. You sit sideways on the chair so your back isn't to the wall. It's always colder near the walls. You pull your scarf higher. You stop breathing through your nose because the cold burns your sinuses. You swear the draft is watching you. You get up to check the window again, even though you checked it 5 times already. The edges are packed tight with newspaper and cloth. Still, the pane shivers when the wind touches it. You lay your hand flat against the glass and feel the moisture cling to your skin like a warning. You turn to the cupboard next. That's another trick you've learned. Drafts don't just sneak through gaps, they ride hollows. Cupboards, wall vents, keyholes, even the hollow legs of an old desk. You once taped your coat around the base of a table after feeling a breeze through the drawer. In winter, furniture can betray you. You wedge a boot against the skirting board and shove an old pillow into the corner. The pillowcase is damp, of course it is, and smells faintly of coal dust and old hair. Still, it's soft, and it might stop the chill. And here's the strange thing. You're not alone in this war. Every tenant in the building is fighting the same invisible enemy. You can hear it. The sound of someone hammering a towel under their door. The scrape of a chair dragged across the floor to block a suspicious crack. The soft, rhythmic squeak of someone stuffing newspaper into window panes by candlelight. You once caught a glimpse of Mrs. Kettle in the hallway. She had an old coat nailed directly over the door to her room. Nailed. She told you it stopped the chills from strangling her in her sleep. You believed her. There are even superstitions about drafts. The older women warn not to let a breeze hit your bare back or the soles of your feet. That's how the fever finds you. One man you knew refused to sleep lying flat, claiming the cold liked a smooth surface. He propped himself up with bricks under the mattress and slept slanted all winter. Claimed he hadn't sneezed once since 1878. It's absurd, and it's also completely true. Because in a Victorian home, logic has nothing to do with it. The drafts always find a way. You sit back down at the fire, what's left of it, wrapped in every blanket you can find. You tuck your feet into a basket stuffed with rags. You've jammed socks into the keyhole, draped towels over the baseboards, and you haven't opened a window in a month. And yet, you feel it. A breath of wind on the nape of your neck. You don't scream, you just sigh and pull the blanket higher. There's a strange hum in the air today. Not from factories or carriages. Those are muffled under the blanket of frost that's settled across the city. But from the river, you can feel it long before you see it. The air gets brighter, sharper, and full of a kind of mischief you haven't felt in weeks. You reach the embankment, heart pounding faster than it has in days, and there it is. The Thames has frozen. Not just a skim of ice, not just a crust clinging to the edges, but solid, silent, stubborn, transformed. And where there is ice, there is something even more remarkable. A fair. You blink. Are you dreaming? Tents are rising. Booths are being hammered into place. A man skates past you with a basket full of meat pies. You hear the unmistakable squawk of a goose, and somewhere in the distance music. Faint, tinny, joyful. You've read about these. The frost fairs. Rare, legendary things. They only happen during the most brutal winters, when the river seizes up entirely and Londoners do what they do best. Pretend that hardship is just another excuse to throw a party. You step onto the ice and immediately feel the thrill in your legs, a wobble, a crackle beneath your boots, but it holds. There's a ribbon of sawdust marking the safest paths. Someone's taken the time to chart out a walkable route. You follow it, breath puffing in little clouds, scarf pulled high over your nose. The cold is vicious, yes, but the energy around you is something else entirely. A boy tumbles past on a makeshift sled, a wooden crate lashed to an old chair leg. He shrieks with laughter as he careens into a barrel. His father lifts him out, grinning, brushing snow from his coat like it's dandruff. To your left, a woman sells roasted chestnuts over a brazier built into a barrel lid. The coals glow red, the nuts pop softly, and the smell, oh the smell, warmth made edible. You buy a handful with the last of your spare coins, not because you're hungry, but because holding the little paper cone burns your fingers in the best way. You pass a printmaker's stall. He's stamping little cards with the words printed on the Thames ice January 18th. Proof, he says, that the river truly froze. You smile and buy one, a souvenir of survival. Further along you spot the absurdities. A man walking a pig on a leash. A dancing bear, muzzled and wrapped in a velvet sash. A man in a top hat offering frozen fortune readings. His cards shuffle clumsily in the wind. And food everywhere. Boiled eels. Gin punch served in little tin mugs. Hot meat pies the size of a fist, oozing gravy and mystery. Someone's even spit roasting a whole ox. You blink, thinking it's a joke. But no, the beast turns slowly on an iron spit, glistening and golden, attended by 3 stout men and a very large pile of wood. The warmth from that fire draws a crowd. You squeeze in, shoulder to shoulder with strangers whose noses are as red as yours. For the first time all season you don't feel alone. For the first time the cold feels celebrated. You close your eyes, let the heat of the ox fire reach your cheeks, and breathe in smoke, snow, and joy. The fire crackles behind you, and your coat finally begins to thaw. Not just the outer edges, but deep in the seams, where damp has lingered like bad news for weeks. Your scarf softens, your toes twitch inside your boots. You can feel yourself again. Around you, the frost fair pulses like a dream. It's the kind of place you'd half believe you made up later, too absurd, too brilliant, too impossible to be real. But here it is, London, cracked open and turned inside out. Its coldest day, somehow it's most alive. You wander farther down the ice, past the roasted ox, past the gingerbread seller hawking snowman-shaped biscuits with raisins for eyes. You pause to watch a puppet show, Punch and Judy of course, where the puppets wear mittens and the baby is wrapped in wool. The children squeal. The adults laugh too, more from the joy of standing still in shared warmth than from any of the jokes. A preacher shouts about Judgment Day a few yards down, his breath fogging in time with his sermon. No one listens. A boy throws a snowball at his soapbox. He ducks. The snowball hits a gentleman in a stovepipe hat, who laughs so hard he drops his gin punch. The ice beneath your feet rumbles faintly as a group of sailors hauls something heavy toward the centre. A piano of all things. They're setting it up near a large canvas tent. Someone says they'll be dancing later. Dancing on a frozen river. You imagine the ice giving way. The sudden plunge. The panic. And yet, you stay. Because fear is no match for firelight and laughter. And when the world is this cold, joy becomes an act of rebellion. You make your way to the far end of the fair, where the crowds thin and the shadows stretch long across the ice. There's a quiet here that doesn't exist anywhere else in London. No rattling carts, no shouting vendors, just the sound of the wind brushing across the frozen river and the faint squeal of metal skates cutting through ice. You pass 2 girls twirling hand in hand, cheeks flushed, coats billowing like sails. They spin and collapse in a pile of shrieks and velvet and frost. You grin. You feel lighter just watching them. Nearby, an old man sits on a crate playing a tin whistle. No hat for coins, no sign asking for tips. Just him and the tune, as crisp and bright as the wind itself. A melody that feels like a memory. You close your eyes and let it settle over you like snow. And as dusk approaches, the lamps come out, candles in glass jars, lanterns dangling from makeshift poles, even a chandelier someone strung from a wooden beam. The fair transforms. The light glows gold against the silver of the ice, turning the whole river into something magical, something alive. You know it won't last. By morning, maybe the wind will shift, maybe the ice will crack, maybe the frost will retreat and the Thames will flow again, sweeping every trace of this strange world away with it. But tonight the cold isn't cruel. It's beautiful. And for a few stolen hours, you're not just surviving winter, you're dancing on it. The magic of the frost fair fades behind you like candle smoke as you return home, cheeks warm but hands starting to sting again. You can feel the cold waiting in your room. It crouches there like a burglar who never left, ready to reclaim the corners you dared to warm for a few brief hours. So tonight, you decide to try something new. Not food, not fire, not fabric, remedies. Because the Victorians, inventive as ever, believed that cold wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a condition, a humoral imbalance, a misalignment of vapours, something that could be treated with the right application of heat, spice and suffering. You strike a match and light the stub of your candle. The flame wobbles. The damp in the air doesn't want it to live, but you shield it with your hand and coax it upright. Then you dig through the drawer. Inside, a small cloth pouch of mustard powder, 2 worn flannels, a half-used bottle of vinegar, a crust of ginger root, a cracked bar of carbolic soap, and 1 pale blue bottle with a label too faded to read. You start with the mustard plaster. You mix the powder with water, just enough to make a yellow sludge. The smell punches you in the sinuses, sharp, medicinal, and oddly comforting. You smear it onto 1 flannel, fold it over, and lay it across your chest. Within seconds it starts to burn. That's the point, they say. Heat by irritation, warmth by war. The pain spreads across your skin like a creeping sunburn, but beneath it, yes, there it is, heat. Not from coal, not from wool, but from your own blood, summoned into your skin like soldiers to the front. Next, the vinegar foot soak. You pour the vinegar into your basin and add warm water from the kettle, just enough to make your feet hiss when they enter. The smell is awful, like pickles and punishment, but you bear it. They say it draws the cold out through your soles. That vinegar has properties: cleansing, rebalancing, reviving. Mostly it just makes your legs sting. You chew on a bit of ginger root while you wait. Raw, bitter, fibrous. It makes your tongue burn and your stomach gurgle, but your breath heats up and your cheeks flush red. That has to count for something. Then you pull out the final trick. The blue bottle. You open it. It smells like peppermint and menthol and something vaguely metallic. You dab a bit on your wrists, your neck, the backs of your knees. It leaves a chill behind, strangely enough. Then a slow, spreading warmth, like a promise it intends to keep. You wrap yourself in your blanket and sit by the last fading coals of the fire, steaming gently from feet and chest and breath. You feel like a stew, a poorly seasoned, overcooked stew, but you are warm, not cozy, not safe, but stimulated. Because that's what these remedies are. Not comfort, but defiance. They don't invite warmth in, they provoke it. They poke at your body like a grumpy apothecary and say, "Wake up, fight back." And you do. You sit there, mustard burning your skin, vinegar stinging your ankles, ginger burning your mouth, and you think, this is Victorian wellness. It hurts, but it's working. You lie back in the chair, the vinegar fumes rising like a sour halo around your head, the mustard plaster now cooling into something tacky and strange against your chest. Your feet prickle, your nose runs, your lips taste of ginger, and your eyes sting faintly from the menthol, and yet you feel alive. Not quite warm, not quite well, but stirred, alert. Like your blood has remembered its job again after weeks of sluggish protest. Victorian remedies were never meant to soothe. They were meant to galvanise. No soft teas or gentle balms here. Just poultices that burned, plasters that blistered, and concoctions so pungent they could frighten away illness by odour alone. You recall what your neighbour once swore by: boiling vinegar on the stove with red pepper flakes and inhaling the steam under a towel. She said it kept her lungs clear. You tried it once. You couldn't breathe for half an hour, and when you could, everything tasted like fire. Still, she hasn't coughed all winter. You reach for the bottle of camphorated oil, nearly empty. You rub it into your calves, your wrists, the back of your neck. The sensation is immediate. Cool, then burning, then warm, then itchy, then warm again. You have no idea if it works, but the distraction alone is worth it. And then there's the oddest remedy of them all, one your grandmother whispered about as if it were a family secret: heated onion slices in your socks. Yes, onions. Supposedly they draw out night chills, absorb toxins and stimulate circulation. Whether that's science or superstition, you've tried it. And if nothing else, it made your feet smell better than your boots. Some say to sleep with brandy on your temples. Others suggest turpentine drops on sugar. You once heard a chimney sweep say that smelling burning wool every morning kept him free from frost and fever. You didn't ask follow-up questions. You were too afraid the answer would involve actual flames. And then there are the baths, not hot ones. That would be fantasy. But spice baths, mustard or cayenne, stirred into lukewarm water and used to soak just your hands or feet. The idea was to stimulate blood flow, trick the body into thinking it was in danger and provoke a response. Like a slap across the face, only for your toes. You consider it, but the vinegar basin is still warm, and frankly you're not ready for the smell of mustard and pepper to fill the entire house. Your scarf still reeks from the last attempt. You let your head drop back and stare at the ceiling. There's a patch of mould blooming above the fireplace. It looks vaguely like the British Isles. Fitting, you think. Even the ceiling is damp enough to grow a map of your misfortune. But despite it all, the stinging, the tingling, the burning, the relentless sour scent of vinegar and old cloth, you feel something miraculous. Circulation. The blood hums again in your fingertips. Your knees ache. Yes, but with a kind of sharpness that says, I'm still here. Your lips are pink again. Your toes twitch without command. And as you wrap yourself in a final layer of scratchy wool and blow out the candle, you whisper your thanks. Not to the remedies themselves, but to the refusal they represent. Because in this world, in this season, under this roof, warmth isn't given, it's wrestled. And tonight, you've won. You've been trying to avoid it. You've done everything you can, collected coal scraps, stolen heat from bakeries, layered rags until you look like a quilt in motion. But eventually winter corners you, and when it does, you end up here. The workhouse. Just the word makes your inside shrink. The building looms like a warning. Grey stone, narrow windows, a door that groans on its hinges. There's no sign, no decoration, no warm welcome. Just a queue of bodies outside, silent and shivering, each one clutching a bundle of belongings, or nothing at all. You join the line, because no matter how fiercely you've clung to independence, cold breaks pride faster than hunger ever could. When the door finally creaks open, you step into a hallway that smells of boiled starch and disinfectant. It's warmer than outside, but not by much. The air feels heavy, pressed down by rules, rot, and something harder to name: resignation. A man behind a desk eyes you like a ledger entry. Name, he says. You give it. He doesn't write it down. Instead, he points to a bucket of lye soap and a bench by the wall. Scrub, then wait. You do as you're told. Around you, other newcomers peel off layers stiff with frost. A boy no older than 14 is wringing out his socks over a drain. A woman with missing teeth is holding her hands over a candle stub and weeping. Not from sadness. but from the shock of feeling her fingertips again. Once clean enough to pass inspection, you're herded through a door into a vast, low-ceilinged room. Rows of narrow beds, each with one blanket, one pillow, and just enough space in between to ensure no one gets any ideas about comfort. This is where you'll sleep tonight, if you can sleep. Because the workhouse isn't a place for rest. It's a place for not dying, and sometimes barely that. You spot a brazier in the corner. It's glowing faintly. Someone must have fed it coal recently. You edge toward it, slowly, carefully, like approaching a timid dog. But before you reach it, a voice snaps out from the shadows. Back to your bed. You freeze. A supervisor in a dark coat steps forward. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His eyes are enough. Cold as the wind outside. You shuffle back to your cot. Because that's the rule here. Warmth is controlled. And you didn't earn yours yet. Not until tomorrow. Not until you've worked. The man next to you coughs wetly into the blanket. Someone down the row mutters a prayer. You lie back, staring at the ceiling, and try not to notice the single candle sputtering above you. This place is not cruel on purpose, but it is cruel by design. It is the city's way of saying, if you want to survive without shivering to death, you'd best be useful. You pull the thin blanket tighter and try to ignore the sound of chattering teeth. Tomorrow they'll put you to work, laundry, most likely, or sweeping the yard. But tonight, you're still just another body in a bed, breathing, waiting. Morning doesn't arrive so much as it drips in, through soot-dark windows and the cracks between bricks. The cold hasn't left. It simply changed shape, from creeping fog to brittle frost that clings to every iron bed frame and wooden floorboard like a second skin. A bell clangs. You sit up before you're even fully awake. That sound doesn't invite, it commands. Within minutes, the dormitory becomes a flurry of motion. Blankets folded military tight, boots slapped onto frozen feet, tin cups rattling in shaky hands. You shuffle with the others toward the mess hall, stomach already bracing for the grey ladle of boiled oats and barely warm tea. At least the tea's something hot. You sip slowly, letting the steam sting your eyes, pretending it's enough to thaw the ache in your bones. It's not. Today, you're assigned laundry duty. Downstairs in the washhouse, the heat is deceptive. At first, the steam feels like a gift. Your fingers tingle, your ears stop ringing from the cold, but soon the wet air weighs you down like damp wool. The heat isn't comforting. It's oppressive. Your skin turns red from the lye. Your arms tremble from wringing linen. Your breath steams even indoors. They don't let you near the actual boiler. That's for the men. You're stationed at the basins, wooden tubs filled with near-scalding water, laced with soap strong enough to peel paint. You dunk shirts and sheets with numb hands. Rub, twist, slam them against washboards until your knuckles bleed. Over and over, because here you earn your heat. One girl faints from the heat and slips on the stones. No one helps her. She's dragged to the corner, left to recover beside a pile of wet rags. The matron passes by and mutters, "Better than freezing to death." Maybe. You think of your old room, the leaking roof, the ice on the inside of the glass, the nights you slept with your coat on, holding your breath so it wouldn't fog the blankets. And then you look at the steaming basin in front of you. You dip your hands back in. There's a moment, just one, when the scald feels like a blessing. The pain proves you're here, you're alive, you're warm in the only way this world will allow, through labour. By mid-afternoon, your apron is soaked and your back aches. The smell of carbolic soap clings to everything. You will carry it with you back to the dormitory, where the beds will feel a little softer simply because you've worked hard enough to be allowed to collapse into them. You remember the frost fair, the gingerbread, the dancing girls, the chandelier on the ice. It feels like a different century. Here, the only decoration is a sign above the washroom door. Cleanliness is next to godliness. But there's no God here, just steam, salt, and the faint, sweet ache of circulation. Tonight you'll sleep under the same thin blanket, but your skin will be warm, from effort, from pain, from the unspoken truth of the workhouse. Suffering is its own kind of heat. You've done it. You've survived the worst of the freeze, wrung warmth from vinegar, coal and humiliation, and now, by some small miracle, you've found a post. It's not glamorous. It never is, but it's indoors. You've been taken on as a scullery maid in a middling household, not grand enough to have liveried footmen, but respectable enough to own a pantry larger than your old room. The kitchen is on the basement level, down a slippery flight of stone steps that stay slick with soot, rain, and whatever last week's cook threw out the window. But when you first step inside, the difference is immediate. There's heat, real heat. A roaring, hissing, crackling dragon of a kitchen range with brass knobs and iron doors, tucked into the brick like a heart-pumping fire through the house. Above it kettles rumble, pans sizzle, baked apples rest in enamelled dishes beside the oven, steaming like the breath of some luxurious beast. It's not your fire exactly. You can't sit by it, can't warm your feet directly or lean in to thaw your backside, but you're near it. That's what matters. You get to feed it coal, open the dampers, stoke it with the iron poker until your cheeks flush with sweat and ash, and yes, satisfaction. The kitchen might smell like boiled cabbage and mutton fat, but it's alive, and you're part of the reason it keeps breathing. Your first job is the washing up. Endless pots, blackened pans, the cruel aftermath of someone else's roast. You scrub in water so hot it scalds your wrists, then turns icy when the soap runs low. You do it with fingers still cracked from lye, still bandaged from workhouse blisters. But here's the trick. The scullery is always the warmest room in the house, not the drawing room with its ornamental fireplace, not the nursery with its flickering sconce. The scullery, where the kettle never stops singing and the oven exhales like an old dog. You learn the rhythms quickly. The mornings are chaos. Bread sliced, kettles filled, eggs boiled, pans greased. The afternoons are quieter, leftovers packed away, ice chipped for the puddings. The cook snoring somewhere behind a copy of Mrs. Beeton while the range hums with residual heat. And in those golden hours, between scraping the stock pot and bleaching the floorboards, you find yourself leaning against the wall, letting the warmth sink through your apron and into your spine. It's stolen heat, in a way, not meant for you, but you take it anyway. Because this is the secret of surviving winter when you're no one. You get as close to the heat source as you can. Whether it's the fire in the scullery or the rage that keeps your fingers moving when they want to curl up and die, it doesn't matter. Proximity is everything. And in the depths of January, with the snow turning to soot outside and the ice climbing up the window panes, being close to the fire, even if it burns, is better than being forgotten in the dark. But warmth comes at a price. And in the scullery, that price is invisibility. You're not supposed to be seen upstairs, not unless summoned, and certainly not when the guests are in their velvet coats and ivory gloves, sipping syllabub by the fire. That fire, the one you chopped kindling for this morning, is off limits to you. You're meant to absorb your heat quietly, from the oven's back panel or the steaming basin of potato peels, like a houseplant lucky to sit near a window. Still, you find your moments, like when the cook sends you to fetch coal from the yard, and you linger just a bit longer beside the cellar chute, where the rising smoke from the range curls up your sleeves and softens your fingertips. Or when you pass the laundry girl, Lizzie, rosy from starching collars, and she slips you a square of flannel from the ironing pile. You tuck it under your dress like a secret, pressing it against your chest during dish duty. For those few hours you feel almost noble. Almost. There's even a rumour floating among the girls. One of the upstairs maids swears by a trick involving baked potatoes. Before dinner, she wraps one in a cloth and hides it in her muff, says it keeps her hands warm right through the carriages, and when it cools, she eats it behind the larder door. You try it once. The cook sees the potato go missing and hurls a wooden spoon at your head. So much for cleverness, but you don't let go of the idea, because in this world, fire isn't just heat, it's currency. If you can't earn it, you barter for it. If you can't barter, you steal. And when even stealing fails, you do what the girls in the sewing room do, stuff your corset with wool scraps and pretend it's elegance. By mid-February, the outside world has turned to slush and fog. The boots you arrived in are splitting at the seams. Your gloves, if you can call them that, are now just fingerless reminders of better times. But here in the scullery, your skin flushes with a kind of earned glow. Your body knows the routine now, the pace of the fire, the way to time your errands so you pass the oven at its warmest, the exact moment the dishwater steams most sweetly, the way to rest your elbow on the stovepipe just long enough to feel the heat, but not enough to raise blisters. There is a poetry to surviving the cold without complaint. And when you climb into your cot in the attic that night, still in your work dress, blanket wrapped around your knees, you smile at the ridiculous comfort of your own slightly warm feet. Because you've tricked the system. You found warmth without being invited to the fire, and that in Victorian England is as close to victory as most girls like you ever get. Outside, London is wheezing. The cold is still here, but it's grown lazy. Less sharp, more damp. It creeps under eaves and curls into alleyways like a dog too tired to bite. But don't be fooled. This is when it's most dangerous. Because now it's not the frost you fear. It's the fog. The yellow, sour-smelling kind that seeps into your lungs and coats your throat like coal dust. The kind that blots out gas lamps and blurs the outlines of buildings until you're not quite sure where the street ends and the air begins. You step outside with a scarf over your mouth, boots squelching in the black snowmelt. The city smells like boiled cabbage and something worse, something rotting, and beneath it all the faint metallic tang of coal smoke that never quite leaves your nose. They call it a London particular. You call it a curse. You pass a man coughing into a kerchief that comes away spotted with red. A match girl squatting by the wall with a basket no one's touched in hours. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnies and crashes into a crate it couldn't see coming. The fog muffles everything, like the city's trying to forget it exists. Your job today is delivery, carrying parcels between houses, threading through neighbourhoods with names you've only ever heard whispered over laundry lines. Kensington, Mayfair, Belgravia, upstairs places, firelit places. You don't go inside. You never do. You hand off packages at back doors and servants' gates, greeted only by hands, not faces, but it's enough. Because the fog might smother the rooftops, but the grand houses underneath are still warm. And every now and then, when a kitchen door swings wide to accept your bundle, you feel a wave of heat roll out and wrap around you like a stolen hug. You breathe it in like perfume, and then it's gone. Back on the street, your boots splash through puddles that hide old straw and broken glass. You tighten your shawl, blink against the drizzle, and focus on the next address. But your body remembers. That fleeting warmth, the curl of steam from a meat pie on a silver tray, the heat of the scullery range warming your knees, the smell of beeswax and roasted parsnips, those things stick. They give you just enough to keep walking. Because winter in the city isn't only about not freezing, it's about remembering what warmth feels like, even if you only get to borrow it for a breath. The deeper you go into the city, the stranger the fog becomes. It doesn't just swallow light, it plays with it. One moment you're beneath a gas lamp watching its yellow glow pool like weak tea, and the next you're blind, wrapped in a cloud thick enough to chew. You lose your bearings near Chancery Lane. The street bends the wrong way. Familiar doorways become shadows with teeth. You stop beside a butcher's awning and check the parcel. Mrs. Godwin, corner of Red Lion Court. You've been there before, you're sure of it. But the fog has a way of rewriting maps. You pass a group of boys dragging firewood in a broken pram. Their faces are wrapped in scarves, eyes red and blinking. One of them is laughing, not because anything's funny, but because sometimes surviving the absurd is the only joke left. You laugh too, quietly. It helps. Eventually you find the house, more by instinct than sight. You rap on the tradesman's door and wait. No answer. You knock again, harder this time, and just as your fingers go numb, it creaks open. A maid peers out, then grabs the parcel with a gloved hand. No thank you, no coin. But as the door shuts, a burst of real heat spills out. A flood of warmth so thick and fragrant it feels like stepping into a bakery. You stand still, eyes closed, letting it hit your cheeks. It smells like cinnamon, browned butter, old wood polish, and something savoury you can't name. A second later, it's gone. The fog closes in again, and you're nothing more than another silhouette in the murk. You keep walking. Down Ludgate Hill, where the snow is slush and the street vendors shout through scarves. Past St. Paul's, where the dome looms like a ghost ship. Toward the river, where the air turns saltier, the fog heavier. You duck into a public lavatory just to escape it. The heat inside is faint but real. Pipes clanking, walls dripping with condensation. A drunk is asleep in one of the stalls. You ignore him. You crouch by the radiator, hold your hands over the rusted grate, and pretend you're somewhere else. That's how you do it in this weather. You find corners, cracks, edges of heat, a baker's vent, a kettle left boiling, a train's engine as it idles in the station. You find them, remember them, and carry them like charms. And when you finally stumble home, scarf stiff with soot, lungs raw from smoke, fingers trembling, you make it to the attic, collapse on the cot, and pull your coat over your knees. You exhale. Your breath clouds the air, but you don't curse the cold. You simply whisper, "Tomorrow I'll find the warmth again." Because this is the truth the city never says aloud. No one survives winter here alone. You survive it in fragments, a flash of firelight, a mug of broth, a doorway left ajar for 1 second longer than necessary. You survive it through borrowed heat. And tonight, that is enough. By March, the frost has retreated, not vanished, but sulking in gutters and clinging to the north sides of buildings where the sun refuses to reach. The air has shifted. You feel it in your lungs, that faint bite replaced by a heavy dampness. Less biting, more brooding. But make no mistake, winter isn't done with you. It's just changed tactics. Now, it seeps. Through walls, under doors, into the gaps between your knuckles. And the chill it brings isn't dramatic. It's tired, exhausted. The kind that sits in your bones and won't come out no matter how close you sit to the stove. You've grown cleverer since December, sharper. You know which baker's windows fog up first in the morning, meaning their ovens are already roaring. You know which seamstress lets the girls warm their hands over her kettle, as long as they keep the gossip coming. You even know which street has the best steam grates from the underground, warm enough to toast your boots if you keep moving your toes. But today is different. Today you're sent on an errand to collect laundry from a boarding house halfway across town. You groan, tug your scarf tighter, and step into a wind that smells like fish and chimney soot. The road takes you past Camden's cheaper shops and through alleyways where the buildings lean toward each other like gossips sharing bad news. You skirt a puddle, then fail to dodge the slop from a passing cart. It splashes your hem with something you hope is just water. You arrive cold, wet, and thoroughly unimpressed. But inside the boarding house, something glorious awaits. The landlady is boiling linens. The whole kitchen smells of lavender soap and wet cotton, and near the back wall, propped up like a throne, is a drying rack beside a coal stove. Towels steam gently, shirts stiff with starch hang like ghosts in the glow. She lets you sit, just for a minute. You slide a chair closer and stretch your feet toward the warmth. The stove doesn't roar, it murmurs. Its heat is steady, slow, generous. You close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, you truly feel warm. Not just not cold, not just stung with steam or flushed from labour, but warm in the old-fashioned soul-deep way you remember from childhood. Before you knew the price of coal, before you counted heat in minutes and inches and luck. It almost brings tears. The landlady doesn't say much, just hums, turns the shirts, flips the kettle lid when it rattles. But in that quiet, you remember something important. Warmth is not just a resource, it's a kindness. And sometimes, in a city made of brick and soot and noise, that kindness survives in the smallest of places. A pot, a rack, a room with a stove. You stand to leave, feet finally dry, cheeks red for the right reasons. As you gather the linen bundle, the landlady presses something into your hand. It's a lump of soap. Homemade. Smells faintly of mint. "Keep it," she says. "You smell like smoke." You smile, because she's right. You always smell like smoke. But for the first time, it doesn't feel like failure. It smells like survival. You step back into the street with the laundry bundle under one arm and the soap still warm in your pocket. The clouds above are heavy, swollen with rain or snow. You can't tell which. But you're not in a hurry anymore. There's something about carrying clean laundry that changes your gait. Even if your hem is muddy and your sleeves are damp, you walk like someone holding fresh hope. The wind's picked up again, and people are moving faster, heads down, collars up, boots stomping through puddles like they're trying to scare winter away. You don't blame them. Cold like this, even the pigeons look offended. But you're moving differently now, because in your core, just beneath your ribs, something has shifted. You've made it. Not just through the worst nights or the frostbitten mornings, but through an entire season of little victories. A warm cup here, a stolen ember there, a moment by the stove, a scrap of flannel in your glove, a baked potato tucked into your muff, and all of it added up. Not enough to call comfort, but enough to call resilience. You cross Fleet Street, dodging a cab that splashes cold water across your boots, and nod to the lamplighter on the corner. His ladder is propped against the post, and the flame sputters as he raises the glass casing. You wonder how many times he's nearly frozen on that rung, probably more than he'd admit, and yet, like you, he's still here. There's a kind of fellowship in it, this quiet, collective endurance. The city never really notices you, but its warmth, when you find it, feels like a shared secret passed between strangers. A chimney sweep's wink, a laundress's spare biscuit, a bootblack who lets you warm your hands over his polished tin flame. The Victorians are often remembered for their inventions, their architecture, their empire, but their greatest achievement might have just been getting through the cold, not elegantly, not always safely, but together, piece by piece, ember by ember. As you near the house, the laundry bundle heavier now with melted snow, you pause one last time before going in. You look up. The rooftops are slick with moisture, but from one chimney drifts a curl of smoke. steady, slow, and blue. It dances into the grey sky like a thread pulled from a wool coat. And in that moment, you understand something. The fire doesn't just burn in the hearth. It burns in you. You carry it, even on the worst days, especially on the worst days. You open the door and step inside, and for once the hallway doesn't feel cold at all. Now take a breath. Let your body sink deeper into wherever you're resting. Your bed, your sofa, a quiet corner with a blanket. Feel how the air around you is still, calm, soft. There's no fog curling at your windows, no frost biting at your toes, just quiet. Tonight, you've walked through Victorian London. You've survived the smoke, the slush, the sting of frozen boots. You've wandered alleys wrapped in fog, stood by stoves that whispered warmth, and outwitted winter with nothing but grit, kindness, and clever hands. You've seen the world not from a palace window, but from the scullery, the street, the steam grate. And somehow, through soot and steam, through cold hands and colder mornings, you made it. You found the warmth between the cracks. Now, let it settle in your chest. Let your breath slow, your muscles release. Imagine the soft weight of a wool blanket tucked beneath your chin, a fire flickering behind a grate, the scent of coal and old soap, the distant sound of horses on cobblestones. It's over now. The winter, the walking, the work. All that's left is peace. You're warm. You're safe. You're home.